Post-Apocalyptic black technology battleship system. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 326 Breaking In. Chapter 330 Breaking In. Yuya never thought that she would encounter a military attack. She is one of the project leaders of the Shenzhen Zilangji Extraterrestrial Facilities Research Center. She is only 35 years old, but she is already an expert in this field. About half a year ago, the military completely cleared the zombies in the corridor area. Then they compared the various information previously obtained from other channels and confirmed the location of the alien atmosphere facility here. For some reason, the scientific research center and the experimental base was built here. Although the time was short, due to the special nature of the experimental base here, the defense level and facility level here are quite high point, but what Yuya never expected was that this place would still be attacked so fiercely. This time it was completely unexpected. Yuya didn't even understand the situation and didn't even see what the devil was that was attacking her side. The entire experimental base fell into a sea of fire. People fled in a hurry, and the military personnel were killed and injured. It was so miserable that they couldn't even lend a helping hand to important scientific researchers like them. In a panic, Yuya only heard someone shouting, "Alien creatures! We are attacked by aliens." Yun's face became extremely ugly. Hearing such words, not only did the voice find it unbelievable, but it actually made sense, because the thing they were studying these days was the facility of alien creatures, wasn't it? But it was this information that made Yun change her mind. People were running outside to escape or rescue each other, but at this moment, Yun turned around and ran behind her to the center of the entire experimental base. Where the alien facility was, this experimental base was completed in a hurry, and the overall structure is relatively poor. However, the place in the core area where key alien facilities are stored is the most solid place in the entire building. This is indeed the case. At the moment, when the entire building is collapsing, Yun comes here. The place is still intact, but half of the dome has collapsed. The flames are burning above the ground, and the place is like a flaming hell. In the center of the entire large laboratory, there is an open alien cylindrical facility, floating about 2 or 3 meters above the ground. A beam of light is emitted from directly below the thing and sinks into it above the ground below. Seeing this, Yun couldn't help but grit her teeth slightly. Her hair was dizzy from the thick smoke, but she stumbled towards this side. However, at this moment, she suddenly heard a series of footsteps, and she turned her head in surprise. Just as he saw in the passage on the other side, a group of fully armed people wearing gas masks rushed in quickly. These people were all wearing black tactical weapons and carried a large number of weapons. They acted silently and solemnly. Without saying a word, he went straight to the alien facility in the center of the entire laboratory hall. Judging from their attire, this group of people was not any member of the military that Yun knew. At this moment, Yun, who was swollen from the smoke, instinctively thought that these people were probably alien creatures. She stood up immediately and intercepted them in front of them. Unfortunately, she inhaled a large amount of it. At this moment, she could no longer hold on to the smoke. Before she could say anything powerful, her body fell softly to one side. Of course, these people who rushed in were Jing Xiangyang and others. Jing Xiangyang didn't expect to see such a scene, and he couldn't help being slightly stunned, but he knew the seriousness of the situation and asked people to deal with it as soon as possible. That facility over there, try to take it away. But soon, Jing Xiangyang and the others ran into trouble. Although the alien facility had been confirmed, it emitted a ray of light and was connected to the ground. Jing Xiangyang did not dare to act rashly, so the battleship immediately sent out an inquiry message. At this moment, the ceiling here collapsed again. A large piece of the building material structure collapsed from the dome and crashed onto the ground on the other side. The whole building seemed to tremble, and the scene was Xiang Yang raised his head and could clearly see that the entire ceiling was cracking with spider web-like cracks that could completely collapse at any time point at the same moment. In the battleship, Alpha also gave the structure point that beam of light is a structure similar to a network cable. It is the connection module between this alien facility unit and the entire global system. Taking away the alien facility directly will directly put the module into a disconnected state. Before the error reporting module Xia Bai got in, Bincheng was disconnected from the internet point. Xia Bai frowned slightly, but he still issued an order immediately, asking Jing Xiang Yang and the others to bring things out directly. Anyway, even if the network is disconnected, with the current capabilities of the 6th level battleship, it can still be carried out through its internal data. Retrace point. The battleship was slowly moving this way. Jing Xiang Yang and the others used this time to temporarily evacuate outside the building, while rescuing scientific researchers and staff at all levels on the road point at the same time. The unknown aircraft that Xia Bai's battleship locked onto disappeared in midair. In fact, it is not accurate to say that the other party disappeared. Xia Bai fired a series of tracking missiles and hit at least 40 rounds. The other party immediately ceased fire, turned around and ran away. However, it is not accurate to say that they escaped. According to Alpha's feedback data, their round of bombardment did not destroy the main structure of the opponent's ship, nor did it break through the opponent's outer shield point. Although the battleship did not have full firepower, this result made Xia Bai's heart sink a little. Immediately afterwards, Alpha gave a prompt and suggested that Xia Bai also leave the battlefield as soon as possible to avoid becoming the target of the opponent's main ship that has not yet appeared. Therefore, Xia Bai asked Jing Xiang Yang and others to directly cut off the network of the facility below and take it away immediately. Having directly dealt with alien creatures, the alien facilities seemed somewhat dispensable. Therefore, after Jing Xiang Yang and others withdrew, Xia Bai activated the tractor beam tower on the battleship that had been prepared, pulled them all from the ground into the battleship, and then accelerated directly in midair, disappeared into the sky in the blink of an eye. Xia Bai learned that Jing Xiang Yang and the others had brought several researchers, and that one woman was even one of the scientific research leaders of this base. Xia Bai immediately stood up, planning to meet this person first. The military had studied the alien facility for such a long time and should have come to some conclusion. The military might not tell Xia Bai any information, but scientific researchers might not keep secrets like this. Book friends in the previous 2 chapters have raised 2 questions. First, Shenzhen is located in a coastal area. Not only has it not been affected by the infected bodies on the seaside, it has instead become a large-scale survivor base of unprecedented scale. Well, there is a reason. Secondly, only 2 of the 500,000 torpedoes were built. The conventional torpedo is used here, not the other one. Well, maybe it is not written very clearly. I will pay attention to it next time. Thank you all. Support Chapter 327 Atmospheric Modification System. Chapter 331 Atmosphere Modification System. When Yu Yan opened her eyes, she saw a silver white ceiling with a technological 3-dimensional feel. The air was fresh and suitable, and the temperature had long since lost its scorching flavor. She was slightly stunned, because this scene was very different from the last scene before coma. In her memory. She was a little confused, and didn't know what was happening. She found herself lying on a soft single bed, and instinctively turned her head to take a look at her current location and environment. But this sight made her even more surprised. This room is not big, it is a simple single room. The overall style is like a single room in a sci-fi spaceship in a movie. It has a silver white room style, a single bed, and a table connected to the wall on one side, along with chairs and glass-like computers embedded in the wall. At this moment, sitting on the chair next to the bed, was a strange young man. Seeing Yu Yan wake up, the young man smiled and said politely, "Yu Yan, is that right?" Yu Yan swallowed slightly. She didn't know where this place was, or who the person in front of her was. But for her, who had just been attacked by aliens, opening her eyes and seeing a living person sitting next to her was a thrill. This can be considered a gratifying good news. She smiled reluctantly and said, "Yes, I'm Yu Yan. Who are you? Where am I? Am I doing a post-war psychological evaluation?" Hearing this, the young man was stunned for a moment, then smiled and said, "Sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. Now, you are on a battleship, and I'm the captain of this battleship, Xia Bai. As he spoke, Xia Bai stretched out his hand, pointed at the clear sky outside the side window, and then briefly explained the situation. Yu Yun felt incredible after hearing this. She opened her mouth for a long time, and didn't know what to say. Xia Bai didn't care. He gave the other party a certain amount of time to react before smiling. I know, I'm a little abrupt, but as you can see, the one that attacked your scientific research center was an alien spacecraft, and the root virus of the apocalypse happening on the Earth now also comes from the release of alien creatures. They are about to take the next step, and the entire magical city of Shenzhen may be their target. So, I heard that you are one of the main persons in charge of the Langjia laboratory, and I wanted to see if I could get any helpful information from you. What? Do you want to know? Yu Yun looked at Xia Bai in front of her. Although she didn't know him, and she never knew whether there was such a behemoth in the military establishment, but in such an environment, such a polite young man, people can always easily make people feel good and close to them. But she still retained a glimmer of caution and said, I want to connect with people I know. Xia Bai shook his head slightly and said, I'm sorry, I'm afraid I can't do this, because I'm not in the military system. To be honest, the reason why I appeared in the Langjia area is actually that we came from an alien facility, but we didn't expect to encounter an alien spacecraft. When Yu Yun heard this, she looked surprised. This young man owns a giant spaceship that can fly in the sky, but he is not a member of the military system. Xia Bai saw the surprise in Yu Yun's eyes and the sudden increase of vigilance, and said, I know that I'm not from the military, and what I'm saying now seems to be just one-sided words, but I really need your help. Now the situation is far more complicated, and worse than you think. The first appearance of alien biological aircraft means that they have probably come to the Earth. You have been studying that alien facility. I think you should know that biological and chemical weapons and the advent of although alien creatures represent a great disadvantage for human beings. If alien creatures have really come to the Earth, the situation is not as simple as it is now. Their aircraft have already appeared, and the mothership may be anywhere. I need the information you have. We are all human beings, and on this matter, I think our front should be unified. Xia Bai spoke very sincerely, without any concealment of the situation or information. I need to know what information you obtained in that facility. Is it true that the alien creatures attacked you first for no reason? Yu Yun looked at the person in front of her. After being silent for a while, she showed an expression that seemed to have made up her mind. She took a deep breath and said, 10 hours before the attack, we tried to pass through the Earth for the first time. Go to the extraterrestrial facility network and feedback to find the upper nodes of this network. She glanced at Xia Bai and realized that saying this might not be so clear to Xia Bai, and said, we started researching that thing half a year ago. I don't know how much you know about that thing. That thing, it is the root cause of the biochemical virus that is now infecting the world. Many people also believe that it is a biochemical weapon dropped by alien creatures on our Earth as an invasion. But the fact is not the case. That thing is not a weapon, but a biochemical weapon. The purpose of a global atmospheric modification system is not to invade, but to modify the atmosphere and ecological environment of the entire Earth, turning the Earth into another kind of hotbed. Xia Bai said, atmosphere modification system. Yu Yun said, yes, this atmosphere modification system has a network. Through the past 6 months, we have exchanged information with scientists from other countries and regions who are also studying this alien facility system, and have basically determined that hundreds of 70% of the locations of this system module are actually not many in the center of the city. If I were an alien creature and really wanted to use this thing as a biological and chemical weapon to invade the Earth, I could completely put this thing, if placed in the center of a large city, with its instant burst of virus volume. The infection rate will far exceed the current infection rate. Our human civilization will completely collapse overnight, and it will be impossible to survive even on the current scale. But alien creatures did not do this. The facilities they put in are connected into a system, and there are fixed rules. The ocean is the main point of release, and the main function of the system jointly connected with other key locations is to transform the entire atmospheric environment. Human zombies and destruction are just the things that will definitely be affected by this transformation process. Just 10 hours ago, we confirmed the role of this system on Earth. It was the first time we tried to find its upper level nodes outside the Earth network. In other words, we were tracing the origin of this system network server. Chapter 328 probably possible. Chapter 332 probably possible. When Yu Yun said this, she couldn't help but paused slightly. However, when Xia Bai heard this, it became clear this system was placed on the Earth by alien creatures, and the upper node of the network formed by this system is. Xia Bai frowned and said, in other words, you are actively looking for alien creatures. What he remembered at this time was that when he had just obtained the Bincheng error reporting module, the battleship had the ability to trace back and locate the destination of the information sent by the error reporting module, but Xia Bai was warned by the battleship at that time. By doing this, he will certainly gain the position of the opponent's fleet, but similarly, if the opponent's technology is far superior to theirs, the moment Xia Bai locates them, the opponent will also be able to determine the position of Xia Bai and his team. Therefore, of course Xia Bai did not take any rash action, and judging from the current situation, is the military here getting into trouble because of this? In the previous life, the magical city of Shenzhen was probably the target of alien creatures for this reason. When Yu Yun heard Xia Bai's words, and saw Xia Bai's expression at this moment, she realized that Xia Bai must have understood what she meant. She gave a wry smile. Her face was pale, and her eye smile seemed a bit weak at the moment. She said, I know what you are thinking. You must feel that our arbitrary actions have attracted those alien creatures. You know this, and we also know that this backtracking is actually allowed by the above, because there is no other way. The world is changing now, and everything in our world is changing because of this system. No one noticed. It is difficult for people to notice, but for researchers like me, the progress of the situation has almost reached an irreversible point. We must stop all this, no matter whether this move will attract alien creatures. In this way, the entire planet transformation system must be shut down from the top. Otherwise, no matter how long time passes, shutting down this system will be useless. The Earth will become another hotbed of organisms. By then, what will mankind face? The problem is not just zombies. Even if humans take a breath of relief, they will have to give up this planet that is no longer suitable for human survival. But I think you know without me telling you that with the current human technology, especially in the post-apocalyptic state, how difficult is it to carry out planet-level immigration or immigration without a clear destination? There is no ready-made spacecraft that can give us. Speaking of this, Yu Yun was suddenly stunned. She couldn't help but glance at Xia Bai, and then at the place where she was now. She hesitated slightly and said, you said you are not from the military. The ship is a helicarrier, so can it fly into space? Xia Bai replied, probably. Yu Yun was shocked. She said, what do you mean it's probably possible? Xia Bai said, my ship does have the capability of space navigation, but to tell you the truth, it is a battleship, and can be used as an escape ship, but it cannot take many people with it. Xia Bai's current battleship can carry up to 2,000 people at full capacity. Of course, Xia Bai's battleship has a very high degree of automation. It has just been upgraded to level 6. There are not many fighters in the battleship. Various related maintenance. We don't need too many personnel. Now a few hundred people can maintain the high intensity operation of the entire battleship. If it is forced, maybe 10,000 people can be crammed in, but in that case, the entire battleship will be affected, and there may be more than 10,000 people. But if it is really a planet level escape, taking 10,000 people away is worse than taking fertilized eggs. Therefore, Xia Bai's statement that he cannot take away many people is also very realistic. Yu Yun looked at Xia Bai's expression, opened her mouth, and said, your ship, is it a battleship? How did you get it? Now, when she said this, she seemed to realize something, and she said, are you here to fight against alien creatures? Xia Bai took a breath and said, that's right, that's why I showed up last night. I don't want to give up on the Earth. Although my battleship has the ability to sail long distances, it is equivalent to being in the starry sky now. You are seeking death, so if the alien creature really comes, and we defeat it, the atmospheric modification system you mentioned needs to be stopped. If I can help, I will help. When I help you, I'm helping myself. In turn, when you help me, you are also helping yourself. We are all human beings, and we are all on the same planet. We are just grasshoppers on a rope. We will be thrown off. At this time, anyone who doesn't try hard may kill himself and others. When Yu Yun heard this, she had a strange look on her face. Xia Bai said, "What else do you know? I hope you can tell me everything you know." Yu Yun hesitated, thought for a while, and said, "I actually don't know anymore. The current situation is like this. Although we know that alien creatures want to change our atmospheric environment, it is really not very. We knew exactly what kind of creatures they were and what they wanted to do. In fact, we just carried out tentative actions, and the attack came without even feedback. We have an alien research expert there. When we tentatively started to try to shut down the entire system, we said that our actions may trigger several reactions from alien creatures. First, if they are powerful and humane, they will take the initiative to shut down this system if they realize the survival consciousness of the human cluster. Second, if they are the same as us humans and their technology is far ahead, they don't need to care about us at all. For them, changing the Earth's environment is like us opening up land and building buildings. Don't care about the previous land on that land. All kinds of ants and insects were naturally crushed to death during the construction of the building. Third, if they are not far ahead and turn a deaf ear to the lives of other lower level creatures when they are in need, like us humans, our actions will inevitably bring devastating consequences. We will be the deadbeats. They are a domineering demolition brigade. They will not show up if we wait for death, but if we show signs of disturbing them, we will disappear from the earth. Having said this, Yu Yun herself smiled bitterly and said, "However, judging from the current situation, we are in the third situation. They will use their hands to make us evaporate." Chapter 329 Shensheng. Chapter 333 Shensheng. After Xia Bai ended his conversation with Yu Yun, he wanted to meet the alien biology expert, but unfortunately, there was no such expert among the people Jing Xiangyang brought back. Jing Xiangyang personally took Xia Bai to meet the people he rescued. When he realized that he had not been able to help Xia Bai, he seemed a little annoyed. Before he knew it, Jing Xiangyang's view of Xia Bai was changing. At first, when he first came to Anyang Mountain, he was almost naturally dissatisfied with the fact that a guy like Xia Bai, who was not much older than him, was actually the person in charge of a survivor base. But as time went by, especially in recent days, when he realized that Xia Bai's long-term preparations were all for this moment of confrontation with alien creatures, his concept of Xia Bai was quietly changing. A long time ago, Jing Xiangyang always felt that Xia Bai was seeking death by helping Changbai Mountain, but not putting his own power in it, and by establishing Anyang Mountain, but only being a hands-off shopkeeper. It was an absolute sign of arrogance. But now, Jing Xiangyang realized that Xia Bai actually just wanted to rescue survivors and establish the fire of mankind. His only purpose had always been to fight against alien creatures that might arrive at any time. Xia Bai established a survivor base and helped Changbai Mountain not to gain some supreme power. At this point, Jing Xiangyang began to admire Xia Bai. Of course, if Xia Bai knew what Jing Xiangyang was thinking, he would probably be embarrassed. Everything he does is indeed based on fighting alien creatures, but strictly speaking, he is not without ambitions, but the bases on the ground such as Anyang Mountain and Changbai Mountain are too small for Xia Bai. It is far less attractive than the battleships that will cross the starry sky in the future. In this case, why should he waste too long on these things? Xia Bai felt slightly regretful that he could not find the alien expert. After that, Xia Bai compiled the information and made a bold decision. He wants to go to Shanghai. This time, alien aircraft appeared at Langjia Scientific Research Base, and Shensheng may be attacked at any time. According to Yu Yun, the survivors gathered in Shensheng are not only Chinese, but also people from Southeast Asia. even for survivors in Japan, as the largest and most famous survivor base in Asia. This is the apocalyptic refuge that almost everyone dreams of. There are even millions of people, including the military and survivors. Although it is the same as before the apocalypse, the city's population is still incomparable, but it is exaggerated enough. If this place is attacked, these people may die. In fact, in the previous life, the news that Xia Bai heard at the Shengjing survivor base was that Shen City was destroyed overnight, and almost all the survivors inside were dead. That's millions of people. After careful consideration, Xia Bai decided that a reminder must be given. Although the military has never considered Xia Bai, an ordinary person, as a comrade in arms, the current situation is no longer a trivial matter. He decided to take a group of people and take advantage of the opportunity to send Yu Yan and others back to Shensheng. As an excuse, he persuaded the Shensheng military to start a large-scale evacuation of the survivors in Shensheng. Xia Bai didn't intend to drive the battleship over. The battleship just showed up, but the alien creature's main ship was nowhere to be found. If he rashly drives the battleship now, he may fall into a passive position. Alpha has already pointed out that the opponent's technology and force are likely to be still on a level 6 battleship. Xia Bai couldn't take this risk. It would be safer for Xia Bai to take people there by himself. The reason is also very simple. He is a human being traveling outside. To aliens, he is not even a target. How can he be in danger? Xia Bai's warship is parked in the Hecheng area. As long as Xia Bai needs it, the warship can sail from Hecheng to Shensheng in only 30 seconds at most. However, there is a prerequisite for this. Now that Xia Bai's battleship has taken action, will the alien creatures directly launch a devastating blow to Shen City like Xia Bai remembered in his previous life? Xia Bai didn't know that there were too many things and they were too complicated. It was absurd to think about extraterrestrial creatures from a human perspective. Xia Bai had to act as soon as possible. On May 11th, 2122, Xia Bai set out at noon the day after the Langjia experimental base was attacked. He and Hao Zhuang took 3 soldiers and set out from the north area of Hecheng where the battleship was hidden. A group of scientists and staff rescued from the laboratory went to Shanghai. During this process, Xia Bai deliberately sat in a car with Yu Yan and asked many relevant details. Xia Bai always felt that this female scholar was hiding something important from her, but Yu Yan kept saying those things over and over again and she claimed that she was telling the only things she knew. And this time, when Xia Bai came out, he also brought the alien facility he had just obtained. That thing was analyzed and deconstructed by Alpha. The situation was similar to the previous era module. If it was still in the atmosphere modification system in the network, Xia Bai and the others may be able to get more information. But now, the only information stored there is related to the transformation of atmospheric ecology, which can be confirmed with what Yu Yan said before. Therefore, if this thing is left here with Xia Bai, it will actually have no effect. It is better to let Xia Bai take it back directly as a sign of sincerity. And Yu Yan also assured Xia Bai that she was willing to help Xia Bai get rid of it. Although Xia Bai is here, he is not so optimistic about the situation. It is really difficult to convince the military and those in high positions. Sometimes, you have your own reasons, and others also have their own ideas, but Xia Bai always has to do his best and obey fate. However, Xia Bai encountered a problem when he entered the city. The outside of Shen City has long been heavily fortified, and the entrance to the city has also set up a special pass like an ancient city, mainly to block and check the source of infection and the existence of intelligent zombies. In fact, there are also Anyang Mountain and Shangbei Mountain here, but Anyang Mountain and Shangbei Mountain, the population of Shenzhou is not as dense as that of Shenzhen, so there are quite a lot of people coming in and out of Shenzhen every day. Xia Bai and the others came here at noon, just in time for the peak period of 2 people coming in and out in one day, and the convoy went a long way. Yu Yan and the others wanted to communicate directly through expressions, but Xia Bai did not stop him and allowed them to contact the local military. After all, the situation was urgent and alien creatures could attack at any time. But Xia Bai was sitting in the car and silently made a call. As soon as the call was connected, he said, "Chiefly, listen to me first. We have known each other for a long time. Although I'm a survivor, but I have hardly bothered you, and I have hardly asked you for anything, but today, I have a big thing to ask you, and Chief Yang, please do me a favor. Chapter 330 I just want to be quiet. Chapter 334 I just want to be quiet. Yu Yun's work efficiency was very fast. After Xia Bai and Li Jianbei ended the call, they saw a group of soldiers with guns and live ammunition rushing over. Of course, the rapid response of the military personnel may not have much to do with work efficiency point after all. Yesterday's attack on the Langjia military base caused a huge response. For the military, two things that were invisible and undetectable by radar appeared in the Langjia area. Not only did they blow up their experimental base, but they also, after robbing people and key facilities, it would be weird for the military not to explode. Therefore, the appearance of Yu Yun and other missing researchers immediately triggered a rapid response from the military point. Xia Bai also enjoyed a great privilege point. Their car was taken directly by the military, and they were separated from the survivors who were queuing up in a long queue outside the Shenzhen wall to be investigated. They passed through the military's emergency channel unimpeded. Entered Shenzhen in front point in this convoy. A middle-aged fat man driving a tattered half-truck watched this scene. When Xia Bai and the military people were all gone, he let out a loud sigh and took a stick from his hand. He smashed his cigarette butt hard on the ground and said, "Son of a bitch, how can they take the emergency exit? Can they have privileges if they know people?" The owner of a car next to his car glanced at the fat man and taunted him in a sinister way. "Why didn't you just say this when I was here and let them tell you why? Can I have privileges?" Of course, only Xia Bai knew that what he got now was really not a privilege point. The military knew that he was the mastermind who robbed scientific researchers in the key alien atmosphere facility module yesterday, and their attitude couldn't be better. Yu Yun thought so too. She was actually waiting at the pass in front of her in the military vehicle. When Xia Bai's convoy came over, she immediately reunited and drove towards the depths of Shenzhen. In the process, it was a green light all the way. The impact of yesterday's battle on the corridor was more serious than Yu Yun imagined. It is said that the superiors had a very bad attitude after learning about the situation here and ordered Xia Bai and others to be put first. Time was taken to Shenzhen Yaodong building, that is now the center of power operation in Shenzhen and the office of the real big shots. The situation in Shenzhen is different from that in Changbei Mountain. The Changbei Mountain survivor base is dominated by the absolutely armed military. It is a last resort administrative measure in dangerous situations and positions. However, in Shenzhen, the system here is more suitable. Before the end of the world, the military was responsible for military affairs, and there was another group of people who were the real coordinators and managers. Shenzhen was even directly governed by the old era ruling system that still existed in China. Yu Yun couldn't help but feel a little worried. When she merged with Xia Bai's motorcade, she instinctively glanced into Xia Bai's car, only to find that Xia Bai's expression was surprisingly calm. But Yu Yun felt that it would be difficult for the situation to develop as Xia Bai imagined. Xia Bai didn't mean to express his position during the whole process. A military member sat in his car. Although the other party showed that he wanted to talk to Xia Bai had no intention of talking and kept looking at the car. Outside, looking at the scene, in Shanghai. Xia Bai had the same feeling when entering Shenzhen and looking down from a high altitude. The city was almost the same as before the apocalypse, but the arrival of the apocalypse did not make this city with an already exploding population much better. Although it seems that most of Shenzhen has been recovered, the actual human settlements and activity areas seem to be only 1/3 of the original Shenzhen. In addition to the military and administrative areas assigned to it, there is no real space for survivors to move. Not much. The hierarchical differentiation presented is almost the same as before the apocalypse. Of course, the only difference may be that after the apocalypse, this hierarchical differentiation becomes more obvious. The impoverished survivors were sleeping on the streets. In an area near the wall, it looked like a huge refugee camp. As the vehicles drove inward, after officially entering the city, there were more high-rise buildings, and those survivors who looked down and out were instead not much left. The conditions of the streets and pedestrians were almost the same as any Yang Mountain. Further inside, the situation was even better than any Yang Mountain. Xia Bai even saw some famous chain stores reopening before the end of the world. Moreover, these open stores are not only for the most basic needs in the apocalypse, such as food and drink, but there are even stores such as cosmetics stores from this aspect. This is indeed what Xia Bai has seen. The survivors with the best recovery after the apocalypse are based in the city point during this process. The military member who boarded Xia Bai's car was very rude at first, and spoke extremely arrogantly. He also had the capital to be arrogant. Fang's car was surrounded by people pressing forward. What couldn't he be arrogant about? Therefore, he came up and asked, "Are you a responsible person? I want you to answer me a few questions head on. Did you launch an attack on us in the Langjia area yesterday? What was your relationship with the terrorists at that time? I hope you can cooperate, and I also hope you can understand that you are now a military war criminal who has thrown himself into the trap. You must know that you are under our control. If you do not cooperate, we can take necessary measures against you at any time. Extreme measures." It's a pity that this man talked to himself for a long time, and Xia Bai seemed not to hear him, and didn't even look at this man point after a while. Hao Zhuang, who was still sitting in the front passenger seat, turned his head and said, "You also know that we were the terrorists on the corridor yesterday, so if you dare to talk to our terrorist leader like this, you probably don't know. What was the situation yesterday? It was still under your control. Our ship came over Biubia twice. You were the first to die due to our extreme measures. Do you believe it?" The military man paled slightly and said, "Are you threatening me?" How? Zhuang shook his head and said, "I just want to be quiet." The military man's expression changed, but in the end he didn't say another word point. But at this moment, their convoy, which was suppressed by the military, suddenly stopped halfway point. The military convoy was intercepted by another military convoy that suddenly appeared. Everyone seemed a little surprised. Xia Bai, who was sitting in the car, narrowed his eyes slightly and looked forward. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 331 Favor. Chapter 335 Favors. It was a group of military convoys that came out from an intersection in front of them and crossed directly in front of Xia Bai's convoy. Xia Bai's convoy was already conspicuous enough in Shen City. Before, the military opened the way in a completely domineering way. Everyone had to give way to them. Now the two military convoys intercepted each other, which made people feel even more incredible. Even in the apocalypse, there won't be many situations like this where the military are facing each other tit for tat. The military leader of the convoy escorting Xia Bai immediately jumped out of the car to negotiate with the people in front. Most of the people didn't know why, and Yu Yang's heart even sank slightly when she saw this. She thought it was some radical military unit who knew that Xia Bai was a participant in the Langjia battle at that time and wanted to cause trouble. But soon, Yu Yang realized that she was wrong. Because soon, the person in charge of the escort team ran back, got to Xia Bai's car, and invited Xia Bai out. This is not a drama of a military battle at all. The level of this sudden blocker is much higher than that of the person in charge of the escort convoy. The person who came was a senior official from a certain local military region before the establishment of the Shencheng survivor base, and he wanted to see Xia Bai by name. Although the person in charge felt it was illogical, he couldn't afford to offend someone of this level. Since the other person was present in person, he couldn't possibly be conceding. When Xia Bai was brought out, the person in charge looked at Xia Bai with an extremely strange look. Weren't these people one of the attackers in yesterday's gallery battle? How do you know someone from the military? Xia Bai didn't show much shock. The senior official was about the same age as Yang Wenshan. When he saw Xia Bai, he stretched out his hand and said, "You are Xia Bai, right?" Xia Bai nodded and glanced at the person in charge. At this moment, the person in charge had hid in a corner to contact his superiors. He said, "Are you Xiang Hangsheng?" The official nodded slightly. "Any Yangshan Xia Bai, I heard Liao Yang talking about you. Liao Yang also told me about the current situation just now. If the situation is really as bad as you said, we will avoid it. Just be polite. This person's appearance here was due to Xia Bai's phone call point. When Xia Bai came to Shenzhen, he had no intention of being upset point. Although the military in Shangbei Mountain has always regarded Xia Bai as a survivor, there is still trust and friendship after such a long time point. Hearing this, Xia Bai also nodded point. Xiang Hongsheng said, Yang Wenshan said you can trust me, but this is the first time we have met, and I need you to give me a reason to trust you. Xia Bai smiled slightly, took out a USB flash drive from his arms, and said, this is my reason. Xiang Hongsheng took it and frowned slightly. This is the USB flash drive was prepared by Xia Bai before leaving for Alpha. All the data on the battleship's previous battle with unknown alien aircraft in the Langjia area was recorded in it. The recorded data and images only lasted a few minutes, but the 500G USB flash drive was packed to the brim. Since Xia Bai came prepared, he would certainly be prepared for this. Therefore, he said at this moment, you can take a look at the contents inside. I believe you will make some judgment. Xiang Hongsheng smiled. You really surprised me. He shook the USB flash drive in his hand and said, are you going to use this thing to convince other people? Xia Bai shook his head and said, only those who want to be persuaded by me can be persuaded by me. I only prepared one USB flash drive. I will do my best to follow fate, but Xiang Hongsheng laughed. Do you want me to help you? After reading what's inside, Xia Bai said, this morning, when I was chatting with the staff of our Langjia experimental base, I said something. In this day and age, no matter who we help, we are actually helping ourselves. For Xia Bai, this sentence is by no means just words. He is an experiencer of two lives. He has experienced the despair of the last survivor's base being breached. Every time a living person dies, you are one step closer to fighting alone. And fighting alone can never defeat the zombie army. Point now, this is also true. Point Xiang Hongsheng was silent for a while, because of these words. He glanced at Xia Bai, and said nothing more. Instead, he stepped back, returned to his car, and left with his people. Point he came and left quickly, which made many people feel confused. The person in charge only received the instructions from above. When he turned around, he found that everything was over. Xiang Hongsheng took everyone away. He couldn't help but look puzzled. When he came to Xia Bai's side, his tone became more polite involuntarily. Mr. Xia, are you done? Xia Bai glanced at him and nodded. Point the person in charge licked his lips and said with a smile, then let's go. Xia Bai returned to the car and the convoy started driving again. Point when Xia Bai walked past her car, Yu Yun's eyes seemed a little complicated. When she was on the battleship, she thought that Xia Bai's visit to Shanghai to persuade Shanghai's senior officials to evacuate the city was just a temporary move. Just now, she also felt that Xia Bai had little chance of achieving his goal, but at this moment, she realized that, although every step Xia Bai took now was taking risks, it was not without any preparation. Xia Bai knows this better than anyone else. In such a situation, having a hot head cannot solve the problem. Point their convoy drove in again, this time without any obstruction. After passing through most of the city, Xia Bai and the others entered the core area of Shen City. When they arrived, part of the military convoy was blocked by another convoy. When Xia Bai and the others arrived at the so-called Yaodong building, almost all the military personnel were replaced by a group of guys in black uniforms who looked like security guards. These people are the security chiefs of the government. In fact, most of them are from the military, and their abilities and methods are by no means weaker than those of the military. Point of course, Xia Bai had no intention of resisting, so he would naturally not have any conflicts with these people. Point in Yaodong building, there were already people waiting for Xia Bai and the others. Here, the other party stopped Hao Zhuang and others, and only took Xia Bai and Yu Yun upstairs, took the elevator, and went straight to the 37th floor. Entered a small conference room. Point what surprised Xia Bai was that the first person in charge he met was not any senior official or important person, but a secretary. Point the secretary has a hot figure and a good face, and looks about the same age as Zukao Okyo. Chapter 332 Military Threat. Chapter 336 Military Threat. My surname is Wu. You can call me Secretary Wu. The other party seemed very polite. He shook hands with Xia Bai slightly and then asked Xia Bai and Yu Yun to sit down. Yu Yun seemed a little confused. To be honest, she didn't know why she had to come here together. She was a scientific researcher, so this kind of situation was not something she should face and deal with at all. Xia Bai was a little surprised. He thought he could see some leadership point, but Secretary Wu said, "Were you present when there was a firefight in the Langjia area yesterday?" Xia Bai nodded and said, "That big ship is mine." After saying such words, Xia Bai felt a little regretful. What he was thinking at the moment was that his warship was completely hidden at that time and could only be found by the military when it fired. The military might only know about the existence of a third party like Xia Bai, but it probably didn't know anything about it. Big ship point. But Xia Bai's worry was obviously a bit unfounded. Secretary Wu smiled slightly. "I know. On behalf of the military, I would like to thank you for taking action to repel the unknown attacker." Then, I heard that your surname is Xia, so I'll call you Mr. Xia. What do you plan to do when you come here this time? Xia Bai frowned slightly when he heard this. Although this woman seemed very polite when speaking, the content and tone of what she said had a condescending feeling. But Xia Bai didn't pay much attention to it. He didn't need to get angry about this kind of thing. He said, "I want to see the real leader." Secretary Wu smiled and said, "With all due respect, Mr. Even a woman doesn't know, right? With all due respect, you haven't figured this out yet. Even if you meet someone, it's just a waste of each other's time. You can tell me everything you want to say, and then, I also want to tell you something. After all, I have my own needs when I come to see you. And don't worry, I will be able to take care of your affairs." Xia Bai's eyes narrowed slightly. He was silent for a moment and said, "Indeed, I don't know the power structure of Shen City. I don't know what you are talking about." Listening to Xia Bai's words, Secretary Wu's face showed the look of an Avo-rich country bumpkin, and she said, "In that case, I think I can satisfy all your needs, Mr. Xia." On one side, Yu Yun couldn't bear to watch this scene. She actually had a good impression of Xia Bai, and she just heard that at the end of yesterday's battle in the gallery, the entire experimental base was blown up. If it weren't for Xia Bai, given the situation at that time, they might have died there. Therefore, Yu Yun said, "Secretary Wu, can you be more respectful? Mr. Xia helped us a lot at a critical moment yesterday, and also saved me." Secretary Wu smiled and shook his head, saying, "Mr. taking away our critical facilities and scientific researchers. In our view, this is no different from a military attack." Yun's face looked a little ugly, and she immediately wanted to refute, but Xia Bai looked at it at this time, and smiled slightly. "From your point of view, what you said does make sense, but from my point of view, these things you said have no meaning to me. I have no need to know what the power of Shenzhen is like. What your leader is called has nothing to do with me. As for what you said yesterday, I was launching a military attack. I was indeed launching a military base, and I can tell you clearly that if the aircraft that were not alien creatures had been one step ahead of me yesterday, I would have been the one to attack your experimental base." As soon as Xia Bai said these words, not only Yu Yun, but also Secretary Wu, who was arrogant and always seemed to be superior to others, changed his expression suddenly. Secretary Wu said, "Do you know what you are talking about? Do you know where you are now?" Xia Bai smiled. "Of course I understand. I think you are the ones who really don't understand the situation. I have only one purpose here today. I, a terrorist, am going to open fire on Shenzhen. Have you heard of the proton collision cannon? This thing may not be as powerful as ordinary nuclear weapons in hitting open areas, but it can be said to be a magical weapon in such dense urban warfare. If you don't want to be blown into the sky by my cannon, just evacuate the whole city quickly. Haha, of course, if you want revenge, there is no problem for me to attack you. At present, the premise is that you can find the location of my battleship." Xia Bai stood up directly as he said that, and was about to walk out. Yu Yun, who was sitting on the edge, was stunned. At this moment, she felt as if she had been hit by a grenade. Her whole head was buzzing and trembling. Didn't Xia Bai say that she wanted to persuade Shenzhen to retreat? How did it become a military threat of citywide bombing? But at this time, Secretary Wu stood up from behind and shouted directly, "Stop him!" At this moment, Xia Bai stood up from his position and wanted to leave. The main door of this small conference room was pushed open. The 4 people guarding outside rushed in instantly, but Xia Bai was already prepared. A gravity grenade was thrown out, passed directly by these people, hit the wall behind them, and exploded instantly. Those few people didn't even react. It was as if a very heavy weight was suddenly placed on their entire bodies. They were directly crushed to the ground on the spot, unable to move. The sudden distortion of gravity caused cracks in the wall on this side. However, the safety level of this building seemed to be quite high, and it was not greatly affected. However, along with this, the entire area of the corridor at the door was locked. Such a gravitational field was more effective than anything else. People outside could not enter from here, unless they broke through the walls from both sides. A region. Xia Bai turned around and looked at Secretary Wu, who was standing in the room with a pale face. He smiled very easily and said, "So, it seems you want to talk to me again. But, about me, I'm afraid you can't be responsible for blowing up Shanghai City, right? Don't be stunned. There should be some kind of communication equipment in this room. You should contact your superiors quickly to see how to deal with this matter. By the way, it's also best to tell your people not to take any drastic actions or measures against me and the people I brought, because if we live well, Shenzhen will be safe. If something happens to us, what do you think? When I think about it, won't Shenzhen be doomed too?" Chapter 333. What do you think of my treatment? Chapter 337. What do you think of my treatment? With a calm expression on her face, Xia Bai sat back down where she had just been, crossing her legs, and no longer looking at Secretary Wu. Instead, she silently browsed through the battleship manufacturing list that only she could see. He is really laid back. Because as he said to Xiang Hongsheng before, he came here just to give it a try. Xia Bai had already thought of the possibility of failure. However, this method of interviewing the secretary really surprised Xia Bai. Also slightly unhappy. Therefore, Xia Bai started to do whatever he wanted. No matter what, if you want to resist me, it is impossible. Opposite to Xia Bai's leisurely expression was the ever-changing expression on Secretary Wu's face over there. At this moment, the expression of the beautiful Secretary Wu can be described as wonderful. All her psychological thoughts seem to be written on that face, but it gives people a feeling that even so, she cannot express her in detail at this moment. The anger, speechlessness, fear and other emotions in my heart. A very inappropriate word to describe Secretary Wu's mood at this moment. She just felt as if she had knocked over a bottle of pickled cabbage flavored 5-flavor bottle. But this deadlock did not last too long. This was the central area of Shanghai City. Xia Bai was making a big fuss here. Even if Secretary Wu failed to report the situation in time, it would not affect the people above him. I immediately knew what was happening here. What's more, there is surveillance in this room, and Xia Bai is a key figure after all, closely related to the unknown spaceship in yesterday's battle on the corridor. Although it seems that there is only Secretary Wu in this room, but behind this, I don't know how many people are watching. Following the conversation here. It didn't take long before the influence of the gravitational field ended. Xia Bai heard someone standing on the edge of the gravitational field and shouting through a loudspeaker, "Mr. Xia, please calm down. We can talk again. Your needs have been met. As conveyed by Commander Xiang, we have understood this and hope you must stay calm. Shenzhen has a population of more than 2 million people. If you really launch an attack, all of these innocent people may be buried with your anger." Xia Bai said nothing. The people outside waited for a while, and when they saw this situation, they shouted again, "Mr. Look." Xia Bai smiled slightly at this time, rubbed his hands, glanced at Secretary Wu who still looked ugly, and said with a smile, look, this person is sincere. Just learn from it." As he said that, Xia Bai turned to look at the monitor and smiled at the monitor. "Did you see that Secretary Wu is not suitable for receiving people? You said that if she receives someone, she will blow up Shanghai. Even if it's me, I can't afford it." At this moment, Yu Yun had a panoramic view of this scene. The look on her face was as weird as possible. Her eyes looking at Xia Bai were full of some indescribable flavor. Is this person a devil? After saying that, Xia Bai patted his butt and stood up. Okay then, wait a minute. I'll put down my gravitational field. Xia Bai said, stood at the edge of the gravitational field at the door, and waved his hands wildly for a few seconds. Only then did the 4 soldiers who were pinned to the ground by the gravitational field felt that the sudden pressure on their bodies suddenly relaxed. He stood up immediately. Point of course, Xia Bai's gravity grenade is not a gravity generator, and it cannot be retracted and released to this extent. Xia Bai is pretending to be 13. This is just the time of action if the gravity grenade is about to come. Pretend to be 13. It's so natural to pretend to be 13. Why not do it? At this moment, Xia Bai walked out of the door in a hurry. Point as the gravitational field disappeared. The man who shouted outside also ran in. The guy was in his 40s and had a face that was harmless to humans and animals. He was standing in front of Xia Bai. When he bowed his waist slightly and smiled, there was a feeling that made it difficult for even the most angry person to become angry. Point maybe this type of person is a natural peacemaker, right? He looked at Xia Bai and said with an apologetic smile, "Are you Mr. Xia? Please come this way. We have learned about your request through Commander Xiang. Although the core team has not yet agreed to your plan, Commander Xiang has already. We are using our own troops to evacuate survivors on a large scale from the outer urban areas, so we still have something to talk about. You must not be impulsive. Don't be impulsive." Xia Bai got 2 pieces of information from this man's words. First of all, Shen Sheng's core leadership still did not recognize Xia Bai's idea of evacuating the entire city, but Xiang Hongsheng acted directly on his own. Point thinking about it, it was Xia Bai's USB flash drive that played a role, and the potential information contained in these 2 pieces of information was that Xiang Hongsheng was obviously disobeying orders, but these words were spoken in this tone from this person's mouth. If Xia Bai's head hadn't moved so fast, it would have probably been led to another meaning. That is, his idea had been taken seriously and had already started. Evacuation operations let Xia Bai think this way. It would be more likely to stabilize a seemingly extremely unstable mood and promote continued conversation. Point thinking of this, Xia Bai couldn't help but glance at the guy in front of him and said, "What's your name?" The man was stunned for a moment, then said, I haven't introduced myself yet. My name is Chen Kaicheng, and I'm a member of our negotiation department." Well, before he finished speaking, Xia Bai nodded and interrupted, "Chen Kaicheng, yes, are you interested in joining my fleet?" Xia Bai asked this person's name because he didn't really want to know the other person's name. He felt that the battleship was currently short of a suitable diplomat, and this person was a negotiator in the military. He would definitely be better than choosing salespeople from survivors. Being a diplomat requires reliability. Xia Bai was really sincere about this. Before Chen Kaicheng could refuse, he continued, "Don't worry, my ship is 500 meters long and has a shield system that can withstand continuous strikes from nuclear weapons, hundreds of thousands of electromagnetic guns and proton collider cannons, and in the future they can even become space battleships that travel across the stars. Come to me for development. I dare not say anything else. Food, accommodation, and everything you need are all included. This is for sure, and if you come, I will directly give you the position of chief diplomat of all battleships, and you will be a senior official. Do you think my treatment is okay?" Chapter 334 Shocking Change. Chapter 338 Shocking Change. Xia Bai seemed very sincere, but Chen Kaicheng was a little confused. He stared at Xia Bai in front of him, and it took him about 2 seconds to realize that what the man standing in front of him said must be true. Of course, what Xia Bai said is true. His battleship is in a period of vigorous development. It seems that he has enough manpower now, but in fact, there is still a huge lack of talents in all aspects. Although there may not be such people when battleships are going into battle now, It's too big a role, but in the future, a guy like this will definitely be of great use. Therefore, although Xia Bai is focused on fighting alien creatures, if he finds anyone useful, he will still extend an olive branch as soon as possible. But unfortunately, Xia Bai seemed to be frightened by Chen Kai-cheng. The guy was stunned for about 2 seconds, then smiled slightly and said, "Mr. Xia, I will consider this. Now, I need to take you to see someone." Xia Bai glanced at this guy and didn't force it. Although his battleship had appeared in the Langjia area, Chen Kai-cheng was obviously a staff member in Shenzhen and had never seen a battleship. He himself was in the military system. Man, if Xia Bai could win him over with just a few words, then Xia Bai would wonder if there was something fishy going on. Xia Bai smiled and said, "I have to ask clearly this time, am I going to see another secretary who I don't know who it is?" When he said these words, Secretary Wu finally took a breath and walked out of the back room. Hearing this, his expression changed again, and it was extremely ugly. Chen Kai-cheng said, "No, the person I want to see you this time must be the one you also want to see." The other party didn't give a positive answer, and Xia Bai didn't say anything. He just smiled and let the other party lead the way. Yu Yun didn't know where she should go, and Chen Kai-cheng and Secretary Wu didn't seem to want to help her. She thought about it and then followed Xia Bai in front of her. This time they took the sightseeing elevator directly outside, all the way down from the 37th floor, through the completely transparent elevator. While descending in the elevator, Xia Bai received an emergency message sent to him from the battleship. Alpha directly contacted Xia Bai through the Bluetooth device that Xia Bai wore in his ear. "Captain, please note that an unknown armed warship has appeared in the sky above Shenzhen where you are currently. It is suspected to be the superior warship that picked up enemy aircraft yesterday. It is expected to enter the visual range in 3 seconds. It is recommended that you evacuate the current city immediately and return to the warship." As Alpha's prompt rang in Xia Bai's ears, Yu Yun, who was standing behind him, and Chen Kai-cheng suddenly let out an exclamation. Xia Bai had been talking to Chen Kai-cheng just now, advocating for his battleship to join him, but Yu Yun couldn't get in the conversation and could only keep looking out the window. She was also the first to see the unknown armed warship in Alpha Alert. It was only 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but the sky in Shanghai was already shrouded in haze. Heavy lead clouds rolled up in the sky, shrouding the entire Shanghai in boundless shadow. At this moment, the sky shrouded in clouds was cracking open. There was a knife that penetrated this dark cloud. That was the unknown armed warship Alpha Discovery was talking about. It was slowly penetrating from the clouds into the airspace of Shenzhen, and the haze in the sky was torn out a big hole. The sunlight projected from above was against the dark body of the battleship, projected to the ground beneath your feet. From a visual inspection, the length of the battleship was between 300 and 400 meters. The battleship had a long, narrow, and flat shape, like a black, huge eel, but it had the same soft flesh and blood as an eel. Different, this thing shows the metal-like sharpness and angles everywhere. From the appearance, the main body of the entire battleship seems to be built of huge black rectangular building blocks. Layers are stacked on top of each other to build the entire huge structure. All the edges of the battleship are hard right angles, and the entire battleship has no curvature. From the outside, its entire hull is surprisingly smooth, even smoother than Xia Bai's battleship. Xia Bai quickly realized where this sense of smoothness came from. Because there are no weapons positions that can be easily distinguished on this battleship. Although most of the turrets on the battleship are semi-embedded, they still have not reached this level. Of course, this is a difference in craftsmanship and style. The entire hull of this battleship was a dark, cold color like the universe. It slowly descended from the sky, as if the gods had pressed down a perfectly polished black glacier of divine punishment from the sky. But the glacier battleship did not land. It hovered directly in the sky of Shanghai. The rectangular structures on both sides of the battleship slowly rose. 2 manta-shaped aircraft flew out from the 2 wings of the battleship. Xia Bai is no stranger to this thing. When we met the enemy yesterday, the unknown alien aircraft identified by Alpha's environmental simulation was this manta-ray-shaped aircraft. However, this time, they, including the battleship in the sky, did not enter a fully invisible state. On the contrary, From the bottom of the alien glacier battleship, several rays of light were emitted from two rectangular shipbuilding modules, two of which the path was connected to the manta ray-shaped aircraft. After the two rays of light fell on the manta ray-shaped aircraft, they seemed to be suddenly magnified. A piece of light was shot out from the manta ray-shaped aircraft, which were respectively connected with the manta ray-shaped aircraft. The light emitted by the main glacier battleship formed a blue light curtain that spanned the sky and the earth, falling on the far end of Shen City, and swept across the entire city with the light and the flight of two manta ray-shaped aircraft. Xia Bai's face changed slightly, and he immediately confirmed to Alpha. What are they doing? Are they launching an attack? Needless to say, Xia Bai, Alpha had already analyzed the sudden appearance of the glacier battleship immediately. Although there was still no exact information about the main body of the battleship, it was not that difficult to know what they were doing now. Therefore, almost as soon as Xia Bai asked, Alpha responded, "The identity of the current battleship has been confirmed. It is the superior battleship of the enemy aircraft that fought with us yesterday. It is not a native civilization of the Earth. There is no record in the battleship database, and there is no record of it. Information related to this civilization. This battleship is currently scanning the entire city, looking for an unknown item. The sequence priority of this item may be higher than that of our battleship. Therefore, the possibility of them appearing above the Earth's cities is as high as 100%. 90. Our ship is currently scanning space through the battleship system, and has found short-distance jump traces in the near-lunar orbit. Its magnitude is the same as that of the currently unknown civilization's battleships. No other battleships or higher-level battleships have been found yet. Chapter 335 Chaos. Chapter 339 Chaos. With a ding sound, the elevator reached the first floor. Yu Yun's face turned pale and she said, "Is that your spaceship?" Although the size of the glacier battleship in the sky is not too big, the momentum of scanning the whole city is too loud at the moment. The momentum and feeling are like humans digging up an ant nest, and there is no need to consider the ants. Feel it, do whatever you want. Point. Although Yu Yun had personally boarded Xia Bai's battleship, even when she left, she did not see the entire battleship in its invisible state. After Xia Bai's arrogance just now, the first thing she thought of was its Xia Bai's battleship. Point. In other words, she hoped this was Xia Bai's battleship. Point. Xia Bai glanced at her, but did not answer her question directly. Instead, he asked, "Shensheng, has something? Did you hide something from me before?" Xia Bai's series of questions were not groundless according to the information given by Alpha just now. This glacier battleship is currently scanning the entire city of Shanghai looking for something. But yesterday, Xia Bai had a fight with the warships in the glacier warship. His own warship was exposed, but the other party seemed to act as if what happened yesterday had never happened. Not only was it not what Alpha said, the other party might not first when launching an attack on Shensheng, they would first look for Xia Bai's warships to annihilate. Instead, on the next day, they appeared in the sky above Shensheng in such an unscrupulous way, scanning and retrieving the whole place with such arrogant means. In Xia Bai's opinion, this alien glacier warship only meant two things. First, although Xia Bai's battleships took action yesterday, in the eyes of the glacier battleships, Xia Bai may be a threat, but not that big, at least not to the extent that they are extremely vigilant. Second, what does Shensheng have? It is extremely important to these aloof alien creatures. Therefore, they don't care about the small threat of Xia Bai who made a sudden appearance yesterday. They want to come to Shensheng to find something more important to them. And these two things mean another thing. The information that Xia Bai had that he thought was enough was actually missing a crucial link. This link is the real reason why Shensheng was attacked by alien creatures. Xia Bai originally thought that Shensheng was the largest survivor base in Asia, and that alien creatures wanted to exterminate humanity. So 5 years later, the first move was to attack this large-scale survivor base. But then, yesterday he realized that Shensheng's disaster was probably because Shensheng's research on the alien atmosphere modification module had to be burned. But now it seems that these may be the reasons why Shensheng was attacked by alien creatures, but they are not the fundamental reasons. Alien creatures don't care about humans at all, so why do they want to exterminate humans one by one? It was Shensheng who had something that caused big trouble. In the previous life, It was probably because of Shenzhen that the alien creatures decided to destroy mankind before the atmosphere modification system completely killed them all. Soured secrets does Shenzhen hide? Xia Bai's first thought was Yu Yun, so he had the two questions just now. But as soon as the question was asked, Xia Bai came to his senses. With Yu Yun's level and identity, he knew that the alien atmosphere modification facility in Langjia was the limit. After knowing the secret of Shenzhen that could attract alien creatures, it was possible sex is almost 0. Moreover, now that things have happened, it actually doesn't make much sense to pursue the many more people's battleships have been brought to their faces. These little corners may still be important, but they are no longer important now. Xia Bai always made a clear decision on this kind of matter, so he quickly exhaled and did not ask any more questions, but walked out of here with Chen Kaicheng. According to the data and information given by Alpha, although the Glacier spacecraft scanned very carefully, it only took about 1 to 2 minutes to scan the entire city of Shanghai. Of course, from Xia Bai's perspective as a human, Alpha's words were simply farts. It takes 1 to 2 minutes to scan the entire Shenzhen survivor base of Novo University. How can his grandma's careful scan be considered? But Alpha's computing power not only came from itself, but also from the data from the battleship's main computer and various actual measurement and control systems. In other words, the time it gave Xia Bai would not cause any problems. What can Xia Bai do in 1 to 2 minutes? He himself doesn't know much about it, but he didn't let the battleship act rashly. The situation is unclear now. The battleship is hidden, and the enemy is visible, so the battleship has the advantage. Alpha is thinking of ways to deconstruct the Glacier battleship in front of him, and formulate a plan with the highest probability of victory. The battle plan also takes a certain amount of time. Xia Bai has been waiting for 5 years, and has woken up from nightmares many times, dreaming of scenes that seemed familiar to today's scene. Warships streak across the sky, raining down death and destruction. But when the day finally came, he calmed down. After being reborn into lives, Xia Bai is no longer an ordinary survivor who only knows how to endure, but he understands the truth better sometimes. You only have one chance. Only by staying calm and taking action with confidence can you get the best results. Therefore, Xia Bai told his warships to stand still and remain parked in the Hechen area. Unless the alien Glacier warship opened fire, they would not act rashly until they came up with a winning plan and strategy. At the moment, Xia Bai followed Chen Kaicheng directly to meet the key person. Yu Yun, on the other hand, followed Xia Bai silently, looking at Xia Bai's back several times with an expression of hesitation to speak. After coming out of the elevator, Xia Bai realized that there was already chaos outside because of the appearance of the Glacier battleship. This is the 5th year after the apocalypse. The survivors who have survived to this day are all true disaster survivors. There will no longer be people who don't run and stand there taking pictures when they see zombies. On the contrary, in this era, people's awareness and prediction of danger have become unprecedentedly sensitive. Yesterday's attack on the gallery has already spread widely. Xianghangsheng has just started the evacuation of survivors in some areas. People have already feeling uneasy and extremely panicked. Now this alien warship has landed in the sky above Shenzhen, scanning the whole city in such an unscrupulous way that many people cannot understand. It is like the straw that breaks the camel's back, and the whole city is panicked. When he stood up, even the first floor of the Koryodong building showed a hint of chaos, which showed how chaotic it was outside. Chapter 336 Li Guangji. Chapter 340 Li Guangji at 1500 hours on May 11th, 2119. This was a completely different chaos from the night when the apocalypse just broke out. Many people didn't know what was going on and were panicking. Some people didn't even react when zombies jumped in front of them. Although in the human world, zombie apocalypse culture has long been commonplace, but seeing it in movies, literary works, and seeing it in reality are completely different concepts. At the beginning of the chaos, many people died inexplicably without even knowing what happened, fleeing and panicking. Now, although people don't know what the Glacier battleship in the sky is for, they can see the absolute hostility from the opponent's oppressive and domineering performance. The resulting chaos can go in two directions. First of all, it is in the central area of the city. The people here are the upper class. Now going out of the city has become a problem. They are asking about the situation everywhere and packing their things. There are more vehicles on the streets and they have even returned to what they were before the end of the world. However, the more so, few of these people can sit still. Everyone has experienced the great escape and chaos in the last days, and they all know that, if a real disaster strikes, they will be stuck in traffic jams. What does it mean here? Secondly, outside the city, those ordinary survivors were even more chaotic. They only wanted to escape for their own lives, but disrupted the order of course. At this moment, the Glacier battleship had only appeared not long ago, and all the chaos only showed the precursors and prototypes of a great chaos, and it had not yet truly erupted and become uncontrollable. How the situation is, and whether it can be stabilized still depends on how Shanghai City coordinates and plans. However, when Xia Bai was in Yaodong building, he saw several helicopters roaring and taking off from the top of Yaodong building, heading directly outside Shenzhen Point. At this time, Xia Bai had already followed Chen Kaicheng to the underground command center. The interior of the command center seemed orderly, with various staff members taking care of their own affairs. The central screen showed the figure of the huge Glacier battleship, while the split screens showed the situation in various areas of Shanghai Point. The scan is still incomplete. The Glacier battleship has not taken any further action, and the military has not acted rashly, and has no intention of launching an attack on the spacecraft. Xia Bai saw the person Chen Kaicheng wanted to take him to see at the back of the entire command center. He was an old man in his 60s, with regular facial features, but he looked a little too old. His face was full of tiredness. He was followed not by security personnel, but by 2 medical staff in white coats. Ben sat in the shadow at the back of the entire command center. When Xia Bai came over, he stood up with some difficulty, stretched out his hand to Xia Bai, and said, "Are you Mr. Xia Bai?" After he said these words, he coughed heavily. With the help of the people around him, he sat back down again. One of the medical staff handed him water and medicine, but he slowly pushed it away. Xia Bai looked at this man and frowned slightly. Everyone could see that the health of the man in front of him was extremely bad. Li Guangji pushed away the medicine and water in front of him, sat in his seat, raised his head slightly tiredly, and looked at Xia Bai in front of him. His expression was tired and painful, but his eyes were filled with burning brilliance. It is such a light that will not make anyone look down upon him because of his tiredness and bad look. I have heard about what happened before. This is not what I meant, but I still want to apologize to you for yesterday's battle on the corridor. Frightened many people. On the first day of the end of the world, we knew that this was the work of alien creatures. They would come sooner or later, but when they did come, no one could accept them acting like this. So, they have no other intention than to seize your battleship. This is human nature. When we transfer political power to military power, we always think that we will do better than others. I hope you can understand. Xia Bai didn't say anything. He didn't expect that Li Guangji said this kind of thing first, especially at this juncture. But he had to say that what Li Guangji said was a good start point. At this moment, the alien Glacier battleship began its next move point in the central main display. Its movements are surprisingly clear. It slowly moved in midair and began to continuously lower its altitude. The front end of the entire battleship began to separate and reconstruct, and a black muzzle was slowly revealed. That is the most common fixed embedded main gun point at this time. A soldier in front ran over urgently. At Li Guangji's side, he did not shy away from Xia Bai, but said, "It's a directed energy weapon, locked at the Pudong experimental base. It is in a state of energy storage, and has just exceeded 1 million. What level?" This number is still rising at a terrifying speed, and the limit may reach hundreds of millions of watts. At the same moment, the same information was transmitted to Xia Bai's ears through Alpha Point. This is one of the command centers in Shenzhen. It has a strong interception of external signals, but it is still not enough to see in front of Xia Bai's battleship. He can get in touch with the battleship at any time here. The Glacier battleship completed charging the main gun in about 7 seconds, but it still failed to fire. It continued to lower its altitude in midair and entered a large area of buildings. The the ship's hull passed over those tall buildings, like hitting tofu, and the structures of those buildings were torn apart easily. This human city seemed to not exist to it. Li Guangji glanced at the screen and said calmly, I understand, follow the plan, there is no need to report to me. With that said, he looked at Xia Bai in front of him again and said slowly, Mr. Xia, I came to you to ask you for something. Xia Bai looked at him and said, what is the goal of that alien spacecraft? What do they want? Li Guangji slowly stood up. He looked at Xia Bai in front of him, his eyes shining. That's not important anymore, Mr. Xia. There are 3.19 million people in this city, accounting for the current 1/10 of the entire population. That can be counted. Yesterday during the Battle of Langjia, we clearly understood the situation. If aliens really come, we will have no way to make any effective response. People at the scientific research and technical levels, a secret evacuation has begun, but 3 million people cannot be taken away overnight. I had placed my hope in you who showed up yesterday. I got all your information, Mr. Xia, from Changbei Mountain yesterday. You are the founder of the Anyang Mountain Survivor Base. Although I have never met you, I can tell that you are a real human, and you do not want the destruction of mankind. Although I don't know how you know that alien creatures will they launched an attack on us, but I think you are here just to deal with them. But now, your battleship has not moved yet, probably because you are not sure, right? Chapter 337 Trident. Chapter 341 Trident. The light in the corner of the command center was very dark, and Li Guangji's entire body was buried in the shadows. The wrinkles on his exposed face were intertwined, and only his eyes seemed to be shining brightly. Xia Bai did not speak. Li Guangji said, if you are not sure, don't take action. Just like what we are doing now. If we can't stop them, let them scan the whole city. Let them find what they want. Let them destroy it. Because only in this way, we can have time to do other things and evacuate as many people as possible. This is what the military should do, but it is not what you should do. He glanced at the main screen over there. A glacier battleship, Shen Shen said. We are lucky. Before this, when those alien experts and I analyzed it, we said that with the technology and delivery methods of the atmosphere modification module we discovered before, if alien creatures really the best situation we face, is that all human beings will die without knowing how. Although I don't know that the alien spaceships coming now are also very powerful, they seem to be far from that level. Their spaceships are still something we can understand and even fight against. I have read information about you in Changbei Mountain. Although I don't know why, your ship can become stronger and stronger. This should be a fact, right? So, if you are not sure today, I hope you will not take action. Leave this to us. Leave it to the military. We will evacuate the people in the city, and we will fight this first battle. Xia Bai was a little surprised. He didn't expect that Li Guangji called him here and asked him not to participate in the war, but Li Guangji didn't realize another point. This time was also Xia Bai's opportunity. The glacier battleship couldn't find the location of Xia Bai's battleship, and conversely, if the glacier battleship wanted to hide, Xia Bai couldn't find them, and if Xia Bai's battleship wanted to upgrade, it would have to accumulate energy points. He must be exposed. In that case, he will still be at a disadvantage point. But Xia Bai understood what Li Guangji meant. He felt that, since Xia Bai's battleships could become stronger and stronger, they should not take action without certainty, taking huge risks, but possibly being completely defeated. He wants to preserve power for humanity. Whether it was evacuating the survivors, or telling Xia Bai not to take action, they all set out for this purpose. At this moment, someone from the front reported loudly, the Dragon King is in place. The Trident is ready, requesting permission. Li Guangji stood up slowly. He glanced at Xia Bai, patted his shoulder and said, Keicheng, take Mr. Xia away. I've prepared a helicopter for you on the roof. Xia Bai looked at him, was silent for a moment, and said, what are you going to do? We can't wait to die. Li Guangji stood up tremblingly with the support of people around him and said, we have to delay time and let more people evacuate, and we have to work hard to see if we can destroy it. Let's go. Xia Bai, return to your battleship.
If we win today, it will be good, but if not, the data of our battle with it will also help you. He stood up straight in front of Xia Bai, smiled, and said, "Don't worry, we are not completely unsure. Have you heard of the Staff of God?" Xia Bai was stunned on the spot point, but Li Guangji was already taking steps towards the center of the command hall point. He pushed aside the medical staff beside him, and walked step by step to the center of the entire command center. His body was slightly swaying, but extremely calm, and he issued the order sentence by sentence. "Prepare to drop the trident, and already combat units are ready to fire." He came to the main console and granted permission. At this time, the main screen was once again divided into two sides. Half of the screen still showed the Glacier battleship, while the other half already showed the scene in space. The Dragon King is a space weapons platform, and the Trident is a kinetic weapon. Just a few seconds ago, the Dragon King adjusted to the designated combat position, and as it arrived at the designated combat position, the military was about to begin the combat process, but this time was still too slow. Because at this moment, the main gun of the Glacier battleship opened fire. At this moment, the alien Glacier battleship opened fire. It opened fire in the city, and an incandescent light dropped from the sky, like a flash of divine punishment, hitting an experimental base below. In the flash, a whole mass of martyrdom occurred there. Exploded, but that ray of light was like a scalpel, moving with the movement of the Glacier battleship, as if it was going to cut through the entire city of Shanghai vertically. That long-lasting blow brightened up the entire city under the gloom. The entire ground shook, and huge tremors and roars were felt even here. In the screens on the entire screen, and in other pictures showing the locations of various urban areas, the survivors went completely crazy, and they screamed, even abandoned the supplies in his hands and his family, and frantically wanted to leave the city. In the high altitude of the city, helicopters were slowly taking off and flying away from the city. In the further picture, a large number of military fighter planes appeared like moths, roaring from the dim sky. At the same moment, the Dragon King in space threw his trident. And it was at this moment that on the backside of the Glacier battleship, the two rectangular modules that formed the main structure of the battleship suddenly lifted up, lighting up inch by inch, and shot into the sky to intercept the kinetic energy weapons falling from the sky. It was a cosmic war level particle beam weapon. It was launched from the sky at too fast a speed. Even if the military had already made preparations for interception, it was still impossible to keep up with the launch speed of these two beams of light. The first trident was like this. It was violently broken in midair. Kinetic weapons are powerful, but they are also extremely easy to intercept. As long as its physical structure can be destroyed in the air, it is meaningless how much kinetic energy it accumulates. The speed of this kind of space 2 ground kinetic energy weapon is actually incredibly fast, but for the Glacier battleship, it is still within the scope of interception, and they also have enough firepower to complete armed interception. In midair, military fighter planes came like raindrops. They opened fire instantly, and missiles and airborne artillery shone across the icy sky, but they had no effect at all. They all hit the outer shield of the Glacier battleship, and there was an explosion, but they suddenly raised their altitude in midair, hovering like a curtain over the Glacier battleship. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 338 Invincible. Chapter 342 Invincible. Dense fighter jets gathered above the Glacier battleship, like a flock of large birds, covering the entire upper position of the Glacier battleship, circling and overlapping, firing wildly. Further away, there were even special missiles such as cloud bombs roaring towards them. From the end of the sky, human weapons were flying like raindrops, but whether it was cloud bombs, ordinary missiles, or even electromagnetic field interference weapons, the Glacier battleship's shield was as if it was made of iron, and there was no wavering at all. In this case, special weapons and ordinary weapons are actually of little significance. Only with high pure power and the ability
to break through other people's shields. Can they be effective? The flames of the explosion filled the sky, and the whole world seemed to be trembling, but it could not shake the battleship across the sky. Even the blows from the battleship's main gun were not affected. But there were more and more fighter planes, shrouding the sky above the alien warship like a big cloud. But Xia Bai understood the intention of the military fighter plane. This is forming a human shield. The military had no way to prevent the Glacier battleship from destroying the interceptor Trident, so it directly used fighter planes and pilots' flesh and blood to form a cunning advance to intercept it in the sky. In response to this, the Glacier battleship had almost no response. The two strange shaped electromagnetic guns that had just risen even fell down again. Only the white light of the main cannon and the blazing light of the explosions in the sky flickered. The brightness that illuminated the entire city also brought greater panic. This place has been reduced to a battlefield, and death and sacrifice are inevitable. However, in the outer circle of the city, the military is still evacuating as many survivors as possible. It is impossible for all 3 million people to leave alive. Some can leave. However, was the Glacier battleship unaware of the military's tactics, or does it mean that it doesn't care about that Trident at all? Li Guangji, who was standing in front of the main control room, clenched his fists. The veins on his old hands were exposed, and his eyes were bloodshot. He turned his head and looked at Xia Bai, who was standing behind the entire command center and had not yet left, and sighed. He said, "Take Mr. Xia away." There was silence in the hall. At this moment, perhaps because of Li Guangji's somewhat rude voice, or perhaps because of the alien battleship in the picture that was not making any difference in the face of the attack, almost everyone stopped their hands. Look this way. But this silence only lasted for a second, and everyone became busy again. At this time, the second Trident fell in space. It penetrated the sky, penetrated the world, and even penetrated the human shield fighters built in the sky, falling straight towards the motionless dark Glacier battleship. Xia Bai didn't see the moment the attack was completed, because he had already followed Chen Kaicheng and left the command center. He only heard Weng's loud bang. At that time, Xia Bai had just arrived on the first floor. The shock wave seemed to come from outside the sky, and the whole world shook like an earthquake. The kinetic energy carried by a Trident was enough to destroy the entire city of Shanghai, and its pure power was even greater than that of nuclear weapons. However, it did not fall on the city, but on the Glacier battleship. Xia Bai couldn't see the battleship from his current position, and he didn't seem to care about it. There are also many staff on the first floor of Yaodan building. When Xia Bai came down from the 37th floor, the people here were actually a little confused, but now, they have calmed down one by one. The battle has ended. Outbreak. They were calmer than before the battle. At this moment, the whole city is in flight and chaos, but only here seems to be into shade. Just like Li Guangji. Xia Bai could tell that he had evacuated more than 90% of the important people here. He was the only one left here, and the military headquarters was not here either. The old man was the center of power in the entire city of Shanghai. At this moment, when disaster struck, he stayed in the center of the city. He wanted to save more survivors and preserve more top-level power, so he was the only one left. Someone needs to be in charge here. This may be the leader, of course. No one is still taking care of Xia Bai and others at this moment, and it is impossible for anyone to take care of Xia Bai and others. Xia Bai followed Chen Kaicheng down, and Yu Yan also followed Xia Bai silently. There were two main reasons for this. First, she didn't know where she should go, or what she should do now. Second, although she didn't, she was very aware of the war situation, but she realized something from Li Guangji's words. Take Mr. behind Xia Bai, prepare to leave here together. Xia Bai remained silent, surprisingly silent. This was because just now, Alpha's conclusion came out. Unable to analyze the opponent's warship, the chance of fighting and winning is less than 20%. So it is recommended not to fight. The entire glass of Yaodan building was shattered, and there were huge and shocking cracks on the building. But if you want to get to the top quickly, you still need to take the elevator to do it the fastest. Fortunately, there were no accidents during this process, and they reached the top floor smoothly. The Yaodan building is 50 stories high. Standing on the top floor, it feels like you can touch the sky. The wind is a bit strong. The helicopter has been waiting here for a long time. In fact, it didn't take more than a minute for Xia Bai to get up from below. Li Guangji was very considerate. Here, he specially arranged an armed formation of 10 people to escort Xia Bai to board the plane. As soon as Xia Bai came up, the captain of this team came to Xia Bai, saluted him with a military salute, and said in a deep voice, "Mr. Xia, the helicopter is ready. We will take you away right now." However, there was another group of high-ranking officials on the top floor. When they saw Xia Bai coming up, they became anxious and ran over in a hurry, saying, "Captain Chen, is this a young man like this what we are waiting for? Let's leave quickly. Come on, let's go quickly." The captain known as Team Chen shook his head slightly, glanced at Xia Bai, and said, "Mr. Xia." He obviously knew Xia Bai's background and the power he had in advance, and he seemed very polite and respectful. Xia Bai glanced at him, smiled, and said, "You guys are leaving. I'm sorry for wasting your time, but I didn't come here to escape in a helicopter." The group of senior officials became anxious after hearing this. One of them said, "You're not leaving? You're crazy." Then Captain Chen, "Let's leave quickly, Captain." Chen shook his head and said, "I got the order from the top to escort Mr. Xia out of Shanghai safely. If Xia doesn't leave now, no one can leave." The senior official was stunned for a moment, then his expression suddenly changed, and he said angrily, "Who is your superior? Does he know who we are? If this young man doesn't leave, do you want us to leave here, to bury him with him?" Chapter 339 My super battleship will arrive on the battlefield in 30 seconds. Chapter 343 My super battleship will arrive on the battlefield in 30 seconds. Team Chen heard this and calmly replied, "My superior is Secretary Li Guangji." The man who looked very angry just now fell silent for a moment. He opened his mouth, looked at Team Chen in front of him, and then at Xia Bai. After a moment, he said in a slightly incredible tone, "He called you Mr. Xia. Which Mr. Xia are you? The captain of the battleship that fought in Langjia yesterday?" Xia Bai did not respond to these words. He just looked at Captain Chen in front of him and said slowly, "I understand what Secretary Li means, but I can't leave." Xia Bai turned his head and looked into the distance. Alpha told him that the chance of victory was less than 20, but he didn't want to leave. At the end of the sky, flames were rolling all over the sky, and the entire dim world was dyed red by the light of the fire. The first firing of the Glacier battleship's directed energy main gun brought a devastating blow to its strike area. Directly below it, an entire city was destroyed, starting from the experimental base near the Pujiang River and heading towards the city. Inland, the blow cut a hole hundreds of meters deep and nearly a kilometer long in the city, leaving a terrifying scorch mark on the ground. All the streets and buildings along the way were destroyed, along with the damage to the ground. The destruction directly brought down the buildings on both sides, and the entire city was wiped out in one shot. The bustling citizen neighborhoods were like paper. Thick smoke billowed into the sky, and the huge dark warship slowly sailed out of the smoke and its main gun is shining brightly again, and a second attack may be launched at any time, and its target still seems to be the former Shanghai experimental base that has turned into ruins, but its appearance is intact, and the shield is still indestructible to resist all attacks from the human military. It does not fight back or evade, but just ignores it nakedly. Moreover, judging from this situation, it seems that the trident just was not launched at all. But Xia Bai knew that it would not fail to fight back. When it completes its target, it will begin to expel and clean up the flies everywhere, and may even destroy the entire city of Shanghai, just like what happened in the previous life. Team Chen took a step forward and said, "Mr. Xia, please, he really hope that Xia Bai could leave and not die here like this." "I know." Xia Bai smiled and said, "I know what you mean, but after I leave, there are still so many people here waiting to die." He looked at the sky in the distance. Those human fighter planes were hovering in the sky like ants, surrounding the invincible enemy ship, but no one retreated. "You want me to leave, and you also hope that I won't be unclear about it. Are you going to die here? But why don't you leave? There is no place for you in that helicopter, right? There are also those people, those soldiers flying fighter planes, those soldiers who are now heading here against the torrent of escape, those who are in the ruins. There are people with guns inside. Why don't they leave? Everyone can see that humanity has no chance of winning in the current situation. So why are so many people still refusing to leave? At this moment, Captain Chen was slightly stunned. Xia Bai thought of many things and people, including the company commander in Bingcheng whose name he could not even remember, Hu Jianming from the Battle of Bingcheng. He slowly turned around, stood at the edge of the rooftop step by step, and looked into the distance point at the end of Xia Bai's distant gaze. The cold and dark glacier battleship opened fire for the second time, and the bright light pierced the entire world point. The whole world trembled. In the corners of the city, people fled in panic. Helicopters fled the city in a single line. However, the military's armored troops rolled over the ground and rushed to the battlefield as if they were dead. There were human beings holding guns and kneeling on the ground. In the ruins, he knelt down among the human corpses. His eyes looking up at the cold warship were bloodshot, and his expression was sad and ferocious. That's mad hatred. Xia Bai had seen such a scene and experienced such a feeling in the previous life, when the survivor base in Shenzhen was trampled by zombies, and when there were fewer and fewer living people around him. He held a gun in the shadows and corners like this. The people he was familiar with died one by one, and the people he gave him a sense of belonging. The place collapsed, and he couldn't even kill the zombies, let alone the aliens. There was not only despair, but also overflowing hatred. He was clearly holding a gun, but he didn't know what to do, or what to do to change everything, while others seemed so relaxed, and let all your life go. Destroyed. But now, he has power. Xia Bai didn't want to sit still and wait for death. If he doesn't fight today, there will be only one consequence. He will escape into space on a battleship. Today, Shenzhen is gone. How many Shenzhengs are there? One day, the courage generated by hatred will be exhausted, leaving only fear and panic. Now, Xia Bai also holds a gun in his hand, but he is no longer a real ordinary person who doesn't even know how to fight. He has a 20% chance of victory. At this moment, Xia Bai finally made a decision. Even with a 20% winning rate, he still wanted to fight. At this moment, Xia Bai connected to the communication platform of the entire battleship through Alpha, and his voice sounded in every corner of the battleship as far away as Heching. I am Xia Bai, in the battleship, my crew. No matter what you are doing, I hope you listen. I want to say something. Tell me something about the war. 5 years ago, on the first day of the end of the world, I knew that this day would come. I prepared for it for 5 full years, from Bingcheng to Shenzhen, from Shenzhen to Shenzhen. What I hope for, what I'm prepared for, is that one day, their warships will be above my head again, and I won't have to listen to people's panicked cries, and wait for death in panic. I will shoot them down. Now, this moment has come. It is here, destroying our city, slaughtering our comrades. Countless people are running. Countless people are helpless against it, but we have the ability to fight it. I will not ask you if you are willing to join the war, because you have already given your answer during the Taclimacan, but I want to tell you that the probability of winning this battle is only 20%, and everyone may die. This is an all or nothing battle, and I don't even get a chance to speak to any of you who are working to keep the ship operational. I can't make any guarantees to you, and I can't be responsible for every life, but I will let Alpha pass on all tactics and plans to everyone. You all have the right to know how we are going to fight, because this is not my battle alone. This is not my battleship alone. Today, we are no longer homeless dogs on the run. Today, we are no longer hiding in fear behind walls. Today, we are fighting alongside our troops who are still fighting to the death in this city. Today, unless our battleship falls from the sky and the last man dies in battle, we will never retreat. No one can trample on our civilization like this again. At this moment, there was silence among the battleships far away in Heching. Not only the bridge, but also the power room, preparation room, and weapons room were all silent. After a long time, Chen Qiansheng, who was in the driving position on the bridge, was the second after Xia Bai to issue an order to the entire ship. All departments are prepared. The warship is about to set sail and enter combat status. At
This moment, the entire battleship was boiling. Xia Bai, who was far away in Shanghai, was listening to the tactical report from Alpha. The situation is not optimistic. The only possibility given by Alpha is hand-to-hand combat, which is to close the distance between the two warships. Although the Glacier warship's main gun has insufficient killing range, it is a real anti-ship weapon. If fighting at a long distance, Xia Bai's warship could be destroyed with one shot from the other side. Only by closing the distance could it be possible to move. The battleship is setting sail from Hechen. Xia Bai turned his head and looked at the people behind him. Team Chen, Yu Yun, Chen Kaicheng, and the other senior officials who had not yet had time to leave, smiled slightly and said, "Find a way to ask Secretary Li to tell everyone in this city for me. Don't panic. I still have the super battleship. We can reach the battlefield in 30 seconds. Please subscribe to the official version." Chapter 340 Arrival. Chapter 344 Arrival Run. Shenzhen is about to end. The end of the world. This is the end of the world. Ding. Yuan King heard countless chaotic sounds. The screams of humanity were louder than the explosions at the end of the sky. His current location was close to the edge of the Pujiang River, closest to the battlefield. From this location, he could even see a dense cluster of fighter jets hovering under the clouds in the sky. There were also explosions of fire. The sky was almost washed away by the flames. The thick clouds covering Shen City were pushed away by the shock wave layer by layer, and the flames would even hang down from the end of the sky. The battle is escalating. The military is investing more and more troops, and the enemy only has one warship. Ding Yuan King was the manager of milk tea shop before the apocalypse. 5 years of hard work after the apocalypse made him mature rapidly. What he used to be passionate about was the kind of little fresh meat, dressing himself up like those on TV. The little fresh meat is the same as before, but now, times have changed, and the situation has also changed. Now in Ding Yuan King's body, it is impossible to find any characteristics of a cream boy. He has a strong physique, and his outer skin shows a healthy bronze color. He even has someone he really likes. It was a 26-year-old young woman, a troubled girl before the apocalypse, with a 5-year-old child, who met Ding Yuan King in the apocalypse, and sparks quickly sparked. At this moment, Ding Yuan King was holding the hand of the 5-year-old girl Anne. Looking among the fleeing crowd. Everyone is running to the far end of the world, trying their best to escape this disaster city. Only Ding Yuan King was running backwards, against the crowd, towards the end of the disaster and explosion point, because the girl's mother is lost. Ding Yuan King wants to find her. When they first met 5 years ago, Ding Yuan King said that he would never give up on each other, no matter what the situation was. And just a minute ago, he promised the little girl that he would find her mother, so he turned his head without hesitation and ran against the crowd. That's when he discovered he wasn't the only one swimming against the current. He saw military troops advancing silently at the other end of the street. Their target was not outside Shenzhen, but the center of the explosion at this moment. At this moment, the earth trembled, and the sky became brighter. That was the second time the Glacier battleship's main gun fired. The directed energy weapon fired from the air was like a scalpel dropped by the gods from the sky, cutting through the broken land of Shanghai inch by inch. Ding Yuan King couldn't see the flash of the main gun, but he could probably guess that such vibration and brightness was not a good thing, especially this time the loud noise was very close to him, which meant a huge wind direction. At this moment, Ding Yuan King hesitated for a moment. Under the huge risk, he even wanted to turn around and leave. But at this moment, the little girl he was holding suddenly let out a cry of surprise. Ding Yuan King turned his head and saw a beautiful woman running out of the street over there. Even in such an environment, even if the other person's clothes looked tattered, she still looked very beautiful. Shen Jiaming. This way. Ding Yuan King looked happy, shouted, and pulled the little girl to run in that direction. However, at this moment, the fleeing people around him suddenly let out a series of earth-shaking howls. It was a panicked, desperate howl. Ding Yuan King instinctively raised his head and saw a beam of light. A beam of light penetrating the sky, and the earth was sweeping across from the other end of the street at an incredible speed. Wherever the light passed, the earth was cracked inch by inch, the streets were turned into ruins, and the buildings collapsed with rumbles. That's the main gun of the Glacier battleship. Ding Yuan King changed color.
At this time, he almost instinctively wanted to join the woman, but the light came too fast and the people around him were too panicked. Ding Yuanqing was unable to escape from the envelope of the light. Scope, only at the last moment, pushed the little girl out of his arms, and pushed towards her young mother. That beautiful woman point at the last moment. The beautiful woman named Shen Jiaming stretched out her hand, and hugged her child tightly. Point then, light engulfed the entire world. Point the flash of the main gun passed across the street, and passed through to the other end of the street in the blink of an eye. Point smoke. Dust and ruins replaced the streets and densely packed survivors. The beautiful woman and her child standing outside the street became the only survivors in the smoke and dust. She tightly held the child in her arms. The fragments of building materials that fell from the air sliced her back like a knife, leaving a long bloody wound. Point her whole body seemed to have been soaked in ashes, but she was lucky. The ground around her had collapsed, and only the ground beneath her feet miraculously remained. Point however, she seemed completely dazed, as if she could not feel the severe pain coming from her body at all. Point she opened her eyes, and her long eyelashes were covered with ash like volcanic ash. She first lowered her head, and glanced at the child in her arms, then turned her head, and looked behind her. Those who were still alive just now, the Ding Yuanqing whom she knew, and who was very kind to her, all fell silent, disappeared, all died. Point the beautiful woman's expression was dull and dazed. She stared at this scene in a daze, then bent her knees, fell heavily to the ground, opened her mouth, and let out a silent cry. Point that might not be a scream, because her expression seemed distorted, and tears fell from the corners of her eyes, washing away the ashes on her face. Point but at this moment, she heard a second buzzing sound coming from the space. Point that bright light once again illuminated the streets. The stones and rubble at the woman's feet trembled, as if they were afraid of something. Point she held her child in her arms, and looked up at the sky with her face covered in ashes and blood. Point the child in her arms also quietly opened her closed eyes, and in the next moment, her world was obscured by shadows. That's because there is a huge thing traveling through the sky, casting large shadows on the ground. Point it was another warship, dark and cold, sharp and powerful. It came from nowhere, passing through the air in the icy desert, flying inch by inch over the heads of the woman and her child. There were many naval guns on it. The flash of the main gun lit up the sky. Point its roar was shaking the entire city of Shanghai. Point on May 11th, 2022, the second warship sailed from the direction of Heching and along the Pujiang River into the Shenzhen military security zone. Point the difference from before is that this is a human battleship. Chapter 341, Get Close and Fire. Chapter 345, Get Close and Fire. Arriving at the battlefield in 30 seconds was not Xia Bai's lie. Point in fact, it took Xia Bai's battleship a total of 29 seconds to get from Heching to Shenzhen. Point before entering the Shenzhen area, the warship had been in a state of complete silence. It was not until the warship sailed into the Shenzhen area that the warship completely escaped from the stealth state and began to fire in full force. The light of the main gun leaped in the air, and various naval guns fired in the air. The sky was torn apart overnight, and the entire battleship was operating from the inside out. Every department and every person was doing their best to make this behemoth exert its due power, but what the Trident couldn't do, Xia Bai's battleship couldn't do it either. According to Alpha's calculations, if his battleship's firepower system cooperates with the military's Trident, if the output continues, it may be able to tear through the shield of the Dark Glacier battleship within an hour. But this is impossible to accept. Point it is impossible for people to passively let you fight. No one has a chance to fight for an hour. According to Alpha simulation results, if this glacier battleship starts to fire at them, the entire city of Shen will be destroyed in 5 minutes at most. And for Xia Bai's battleship, if they were in space and fired at each other with astronomical units, the battleship might have room to move. But if Xia Bai's battleship was in Heching, at such a distance, this glacier battleship would be fully capable of firing a single shot to destroy Xia Bai's spaceship. So Xia Bai chose close combat. Point this is the only chance. Point at this time, the alien glacier battleship had just completed its second round of main gun firing and was slowly raising its altitude. This behavior only revealed one piece of information. Its primary target should have been destroyed. This means it has the time and energy to deal with humans at this moment. Xia Bai's battleship was approaching the center of the battlefield and passing over Yaodong building. Xia Bai also took this opportunity to return to the battleship. Welcome back, dear Captain, except for Alpha's words. The entire bridge of the battleship was strangely silent. Xia Bai was also silent. What is projected on the main screen of the battleship is the true scale scene outside the battleship. The Glacier battleship not far away is very close. At the same time, Xia Bai's battleship has also connected to several people in Shenzhen through Li Guangji's channel. In this war zone, Secretary Li Guangji is in the center of the screen. He was dissatisfied with Xia Bai's rash action when he only had a 20% winning rate, but at this moment, the situation was like this, and he wouldn't say anything else. At this moment, in the corner of the battleship's main screen, there are 6 split screens, including the Yaodong Command Center, the On-Site Command Center, the Fighter Cluster Command Center, and so on. Xia Bai was the first to speak and said, I'm Angshan Xia Bai. To be honest, I don't know most of you, and I think you don't know me either, but I think it doesn't matter at this moment. The important thing is that we all want to save this city and get that big ship out of the sky, so I hope we can work together. The person in charge of the Fighter Cluster Combat Platform said directly, I'm at the command center of the Jinling military region. I don't know the situation on the scene, but I will directly connect you to the captains of each fighter formation on the scene. Other than that, everyone in the venue was silent. Li Guangji said, we have no choice. As long as you can destroy it, we will fully cooperate with you. At this moment, Bailan, who was at the other end of the bridge, suddenly said, in the direction of Shanghai DC area, a manta ray aircraft in standby mode has just arrived. At the same moment, Alpha sounded the alarm. The social messages sent by us have been ignored. The enemy ship's main gun is charging and has pre-locked our ship. The hit rate is 100%. It is recommended to take immediate measures. Xia Bai looked at the bright flash of the main gun of the Glacier battleship facing him in the screen and took a deep breath. Let's hit it. The battleship accelerated rapidly. The cannons on the left and right ceased fire at the same time, and each command center once again entered a state of complete war. Xia Bai's orders flew out like raindrops. Put out all our fighter planes and drones. No matter what the opponent's manta ray aircraft wants to do, cooperate with the military's battle group and shoot them all down for me. The rear hatch of the battleship opened directly, and battleship drones were released in an instant, passing through the sky like lightning and rushing straight to the end of the sky. But this was still a bit slow. The manta ray fighter took the first step and flew into the sky like lightning. It accelerated to the breakaway speed in an instant. The entire battleship rubbed against the atmosphere and became red hot and boiling, like a meteorite flying backwards. Its goal is the Dragon King in space. Although for the Glacier battleship, the Trident is far from being able to destroy its shield, and it is very far away from the main battleship that can destroy it, but it is obviously unwilling to consume a lot of energy for this thing. At the same moment, Xia Bai's battleship was also traveling through the sky. Xiang Hongsheng, who is in charge of ground command, has been a soldier all his life and has never seen such a scene. The battleship accelerated in a corner of the city and rushed towards another battleship in an instant. Almost instantly, the distance between the two was infinitely closer, but the collision was impossible. There was only the fierce friction of the shield, and the plane where the shield hit was half exposed in the sky like a mirror being illuminated. Comes in curved shape. During this process, the main gun of the Dark Glacier battleship also fired, but it obviously did not expect Xia Bai to use such a rogue style of play. Although it had adjusted the angle of its battleship as much as possible, but the shot still missed. The light swept across the vast sky and the world, penetrating the tops of the clouds. The military fighter planes along the way were affected, and they were directly melted in the dazzling flash of light in midair the moment Xia Bai's battleship collided with the Glacier battleship. The secondary torpedo system on the bottom of the battleship opened fire instantly. In addition to the main torpedo weapon, the other 12 torpedo launchers fired at the same time, releasing 12 electromagnetic pulses in succession.
The torpedoes all exploded outside the opponent's shield point at this time. Xia Bai's battleship had already used the acceleration just now to distance itself from the Glacier battleship again. The naval guns fired one after another, shining in the air, and the battleship's main gun also fired dazzlingly. The 12 electromagnetic pulse torpedoes were a test by Alpha, but pulse weapons of this level were enough to affect the main body of the Xia Bai battleship, so Xia Bai had to urgently distance himself before the explosion. Chapter 342 Beam Cannon Array. Chapter 346 Beam Cannon Array. 12 electromagnetic pulse torpedoes had no effect. The feedback of the blow came back immediately, and Alpha started analyzing it almost immediately, but the process took much longer than Xia Bai imagined. If you want to destroy the opponent's warship, you must first break the opponent's shield point. To be honest, in the past 5 years, Xia Bai never thought that his first battle with alien creatures would revolve around shields and space battles. Shields and armor are actually the same thing. The real difference can be reflected in this. For example, how can a person in the Stone Age penetrate the steel plate of a tank? This may be possible by grinding an iron pestle into a needle, but how can a Stone Age person break through an energy shield? In Alpha's tactics, there is only one way to destroy the opponent's warship, which is to knock down the opponent's shield first. Alpha needed time to analyze the opponent's shield, and Xia Bai needed to buy time. The huge battleship turned for the second time in the sky, once again closing the distance with the opponent's Glacier battleship. But this time, the Glacier battleship no longer activated its main guns. The alien creatures were obviously aware of Xia Bai's tactics. They fought hand to hand and stopped using the useless main guns on the back of the Glacier battleship. The cuboid outer armor that formed it was moving one by one, turning into a series of turrets that Xia Bai had never seen before, and they opened fire instantly. The outer armor of this battleship is all stacked in this kind of rectangular parallelepiped, and at the same time, they are also beam energy turrets, forming a phalanx with amazing firepower. In an instant, the flash of energy beam weapons lit up the entire sky. At the moment when these turrets fire, the outer shield of the Dark Glacier battleship will recognize the energy particles, and in less than a tenth of a second, it will open a vent only for strikes to fly by, allowing these strikes to occur instantly. Fly out. The phalanx firepower of the beam energy turret was astonishing. In one salvo, the damage to Xia Bai's shield reached 70%, and the energy consumption reached an incredible level in an instant. But there is no way around it. You can avoid the fatal blow of the main gun, but it is impossible for these ordinary beam energy naval guns to be helpless against the battleship. These beam turrets have incredible firepower, but they are also the source of what Alpha calls a 20% win rate. This model of turret as armor and armor as turret is very beneficial for the navigation of battleships, but it also means that the physical armor of the opponent's battleship is very weak. As long as Xia Bai can break through the opponent's Glacier battleship, the energy shield used to be able to destroy the opponent's main battleship with the physics that the Xia Bai battleship now possesses. Otherwise, if the opponent's battleship's main armor and energy shield were as powerful, this battle would not have to be fought at all. But that's impossible. If the opponent's main armor has sufficient defense, there's no need to add a shield to it. However, the moment the Glacier battleship phalanx opened fire, Xia Bai's battleship went into red alert. It was not a main gun that could fire once a minute, but a conventional gun that fired extremely fast. Only 2 seconds after it fired, Xia Bai's battleship's outer shield was completely unable to withstand the opponent's full-scale fire. The battleship's energy supply speed can no longer provide the energy required to instantly defend against such a degree of intensive strikes, and the next best thing can only be done to protect the core position of the battleship as much as possible. Therefore, in just a few seconds, Xia Bai's battleship began to burst into flames, and was shot through by the dense light of the beam energy point. But Xia Bai had no intention of retreating. His warship was infinitely adjacent to the opponent's warship, and the cannons of each other's warships fired wildly. Xia Bai's warship's various weapon systems are pouring out firepower all the time, including missile arrays, electromagnetic gun arrays, naval gun systems, and even short-range gunship-launched rockets. Looking from a distance, Xia Bai's warship is astonishingly powerful, with all kinds of weapons filling the sky. flying and bombarding the very close glacier warship point opposite Xia Bai's battleship. The Dark Glacier battleship showed a completely different combat mode from Xia Bai's. It is cold and powerful. The weapon system is only concentrated on the upper and middle part of the battleship. 20 rectangular beam energy turrets fire in a cluster. From a distance, the dazzling blow looks like a piece of light flying out. Instantly bombarded the main structure of the Xia Bai battleship point. Xia Bai's battleship tried its best, but was unable to penetrate the opponent's shield. However, fire spread on his own battleship, thick smoke billowed, and the warning of damage to the battleship came like raindrops. Warning. One deck is shattered. Warning. The battleship's central lounge has been destroyed. Warning. Armor plates number 7 and number 11 on the battleship's flanks have been completely destroyed. Warning. There is a malfunction in the ammunition supply system of the missile launch system, and the manual loading team is in place. Warning. The number 3 embedded controllable turret has been destroyed. Warning. Warning. And in Shen City below, on the land far and near, whether survivors or soldiers, at this moment, countless people in Shen City turned their heads and instinctively looked at the sky on this side, watching the sky rising. The warship with billowing smoke was still fighting fiercely with the glacier warship in hell, who was still not afraid of death point except for military combatants. Few people actually know where this ship came from, but at this moment, everyone can see that it is fighting for mankind point in the Yaodong Underground Command Center. Li Guangji looked at this scene on the screen and coughed heavily. The medical staff around him rushed up urgently, trying to support him, but found that Li Guangji's hands had already been clenched into fists, and his body every muscle on it was tense. The battlefield is being divided. Xia Bai's battleship and the Dark Glacier battleship approached and opened fire. At the same time, the military's battle group and the battleship's fighter jet formation were attacking the two alien manta ray aircraft. Shenzhen, the captain of the Xia Bai fighter formation, withdrew his slightly worried eyes from the battlefield, where the main battleships were fighting, and looked at the sky above him. There is a flash of light at the end of the world. The Dragon King in orbit in the sky was completely destroyed a few seconds ago, and the alien manta ray aircraft was turning down from the sky, turning into a red lightning and heading towards them. At this moment, Shenzhen was flying up with his fighter jets like lightning, facing the manta ray aircraft head on. These things cannot be left alone. If they are left alone, their high mobility and flexibility will cause huge trouble to the warships. Chapter 343 Fighter in the Sky. Chapter 347 Fighters in the Sky. The Glacier battleship's main gun fired for the fourth time. The bright flash of the directed energy weapon pierced the entire sky and the world almost instantly, grazing against the outer left wing of Xia Bai's battleship, leaving a terrifying scorch mark on Xia Bai's battleship. The distance between the two was still extremely close, but the other party only made slight position adjustments, and the shot almost hit Xia Bai's battleship. The flash of this main gun passed over the battleship and landed on the far side of Shen City. A large area of the city collapsed with a loud noise. At the far end of the sky, a group of human fighter jets were fiercely exchanging fire with the two manta ray aircraft in the sky. Different from the exchange of fire between the two behemoth battleships here, it was a completely fast-paced battlefield. Xia Bai's fighter formation commander Shenzhen and the military's fighter group commander Cheng Yingzhuo were using fighter jets to build an iron curtain, like it was like a swarm surrounding the two enemy manta ray aircraft, firing continuously. The two manta ray aircraft also moved like thunder, turning back and forth in mid-air. Every time they fired, they would definitely destroy a fighter plane and pull out a bright explosion flame in mid-air. This is the first time Shenzhen has participated in such a battle. He is 37 years old this year, and he never thought that he could be a pilot and engage in firefights with enemies in the air, and the target of the firefight was an alien spacecraft. It is impossible not to be frightened or afraid. The performance of the manta ray aircraft can completely suppress their fighters. Just now, Shenzhen led his formation to meet them head-on. The manta ray aircraft hit head-on like lightning, smashing one of their fighters into pieces in the air. A large group of fireworks exploded in the sky. Shenzhen changed his color and led his team to quickly lower the altitude.
passing over the ruins of a messy city above the ground at low altitude, and then raised the altitude point. Only then did he realize that the military had already stepped forward. The military's fighter planes outnumbered them, and they looked like a large group of entrenched dark clouds in the sky. Shinzen had never seen the previous scene where the military formed a human shield to cover the trident, but the scene at this moment shocked him. Their telecom channel has been connected to the military, and the voice of the on-site commander of the military fighter group was very clear to him. We must take down their outer shields, Clan 3, and activate Formation 6. Shinzen also knew this. The opponent's shield was amazing and powerful. If the outer energy shields of the two manta ray aircraft could not be destroyed, it would be impossible to destroy them from the air. But Shinzen was really surprised by the military's tactics. That was when everyone pressed forward and surrounded a manta ray aircraft like a swarm. They approached and opened fire, pouring firepower crazily on the manta ray aircraft. The cost of doing this is huge. In this way, the military's firepower can guarantee a 100% hit, but at the same time, the military's fighter planes become completely living targets. None of the fighter planes on the human side have shields, and the manta ray aircraft's beam energy weapons can detonate an unknown number of fighter planes in the air with a sweep. But if they destroy one, another fighter plane will come up from behind. They are fearless. Death formed a steel-like battle formation in mid-air, locking the manta ray aircraft, grinding away the opponent's shield inch by inch. Shinzen felt slightly ashamed. Just during the first exchange of fire, he used his human instinct to avoid a head-on confrontation, and now, but apart from shame, what emerged in Shinzen's heart was more real courage. Sometimes, people's courage often comes from others. When people around you are brave, you will naturally become brave. Especially now, Shinzen knew very well that the situation on the main battleship was getting worse and worse. Everyone was fighting to the death. If he took a step back now, countless people might die due to his own weakness. This is something that no amount of training and information could really make him understand. But now, he finally understands it. He only felt a surge of blood, and he led the formation behind him into the battlefield like a blade, to surround another alien manta ray aircraft. At the same time, at the other end of the battlefield, the exchange of fire between the two warships was reaching a fever pitch. The ground and the city under their feet were all reduced to ruins. Xia Bai's warship was bursting into flames, but the Glacier warship was still burning. It was cold and dark. Regardless of the bombardment from the Xia Bai battleship or the attacks from the military, led by Xiang Hongsheng below, all were intercepted by its shield without exception, and there was a loud bang outside the hull of its huge and dark battleship. The explosion and bright flames briefly revealed the invisible shield. At this moment, the analytical structure of Alpha finally appeared. According to Alpha's conclusion, the shield used by this Glacier battleship is a two-way overlapping shield, which is divided into two parts. One part is specially designed to withstand the current intensive fire attack, while the other part is designed to deal with electromagnetic pulse weapons. These two kinds of shields overlap each other and are in a state similar to symbiosis. Whether it is an electromagnetic gun, a naval gun or an electromagnetic pulse torpedo, there is nothing that can be done against such a shield. Xia Bai listened to Alpha's description and looked at the picture on the screen in front of him. He couldn't help but said, if it is such a symbiotic overlap, if we can raise its regular shield to resist our main gun, if electromagnetic pulse weapons are dropped during bombardment, is it possible to skip their other layer of shield that resists electromagnetic pulse weapons and destroy their entire shield system and electronic system? Alpha responded immediately, this is a completely ineffective solution. The opponent's two shields exist at the same time and can function at the same time. There is currently only one solution that can destroy the opponent's shield system in a short period of time. When the opponent's main gun fires, the shield in the main gun area will be closed briefly, leaving a gap for breakthrough. The position of this gap will only be a little larger than the diameter of the main gun's beam energy. We only have by launching an electromagnetic pulse torpedo in front of the main gun. It is possible to bypass the opponent's shield system and destroy the opponent's warship's electronic system. If the opponent does not evade or intercept it, Xia Bai raised his head when he heard this and looked at the cold glacier battleship in the distant sky. Point fire in front of the main gun, or when the opponent does not intercept or evade, how could the other party not evade or intercept? And at this moment, the main gun of the glacier battleship fired for the 4th time, and the light shone in the air. Xia Bai looked at the flash of light that penetrated the world, but his eyes narrowed slightly. Chapter 344 Breakdown. Chapter 348 Breakdown. The first Manta craft was destroyed. In just a split second, when the shield was destroyed, the invincible Manta aircraft was instantly transformed into a ball of fireworks exploding in midair by intensive firepower. Xian Zhen's heart shook slightly, and then he raised his fighter plane at high speed and rushed to the battlefield on the other side like lightning. The situation over there is not good. The military has invested a lot of power to surround one Manta Ray aircraft, but it is destined that there is not much power to intercept another Manta Ray aircraft. But now, as the Manta Ray aircraft here was destroyed in the air, a large number of military fighter planes circled and roared in midair towards the battlefield over their. The Manta Ray aircraft was obviously aware of the military's tactics and was flying through the air at high speed. However, the number of military fighter planes and Xian Zhen's fighter planes was also astonishing, outflanking and intercepting them from both sides. Flying and circling fiercely in the sky, the sharp roar seemed to tear the entire earth apart. At the far end of Shanghai, groups of survivors are evacuating the Shanghai area. However, in the streets and alleys of Shanghai, there are still many people who have not had time to evacuate. Some of them are still running on the ground, frantically trying to escape from the city. Some people stopped running for some unknown reason and just stood in the streets and alleys of the city, looking up at the sky. At this moment, Xian Zhen received a message from the battleship. That was the latest combat order issued by Xia Bai. Our ship will launch the final attack, and all units are requested to assist in the battle. What does the final blow mean? Xian Zhen looked at this message and felt a certain uneasiness in his heart. He instinctively raised his head and looked towards the sky. Above the ruins of the city, 2 huge warships were slowly moving. At this moment, Xia Bai made a decision in the bridge that surprised everyone. Alpha, if we withstand the bombardment of the opponent's main gun head on, can we shoot out our torpedoes from the front? This is what Xia Bai thinks. It can only hit from the front of the main gun, so the body of the battleship can only be used to receive the opponent's bombardment. Only like this, only like this, only in this way can we seize the only chance of destruction, destroy their shields, and destroy the cold warship before they are completely shot down from midair by the opponent. Xia Bai's eyes flashed coldly, and his question received Alpha's immediate response. If the warship is hit by the opponent's main gun, at that angle, the electromagnetic weapon can indeed be launched. During the 10-second interval between the opponent's main gun firing, if the opponent fails to intercept and evade, it will definitely hit. It will definitely hit. Xia Bai gritted his teeth. He stared at the glacier battleship that was so close, his eyes turning slightly blood red. This is a difficult decision because the current battleship is no longer the first-class battleship before. There is not only him in this battleship, but also countless people. They and Xia Bai rushed to the battlefield, and now, in the sky, the 4th blaze of the glacier battleship's main gun was gradually dimming, and it was readjusting its angle, preparing for the next firing. As the exchange of fire with Xia Bai's battleship becomes longer and longer, various data of Xia Bai's battleship are also being analyzed by the other side. The opponent's main gun is being adjusted every time it fires. It won't take long for the opponent's main gun to also be adjusted. The cannon destroyed Xia Bai's battleship in the air. If the battleship is bombarded head-on by the opponent's main gun, the battleship may be destroyed and everyone on the battleship may die. Such a price, such a responsibility. Can Xia Bai bear it? At this time, Bailan suddenly said, Xia Bai. She stood up from her position in the bridge, turned her head, and looked at the chin of the captain behind her, and looked at the struggling and hesitant expression on Xia Bai's face. In the bridge, all information is semi-shared, and there is no evasion in the conversation between Xia Bai and Alpha. Xia Bai also raised his head at this moment, and looked at Bailan over there. Bailan smiled slightly at him. in the midst of the explosions and shaking battleships that filled the sky, her smile seemed to make people relax involuntarily and give them a sense of peace. Xia Bai, we have no other choice, right? Xia Bai looked at her, slightly in a trance point at this moment. Chen-Chi and Sheng over there had already said, start adjusting the position of the battleship. Each unit is preparing to receive bombardment. Alpha, I need the position of the battleship to be hit with the lowest damage. Bai. Lan smiled slightly, sat down, and started to prepare. Point. The battleship is slowly turning in the sky. Point. Chen-Chi and Cheng was controlling the warship's deflection angle inch by inch, preparing to face the bombardment of the Glacier battleship's main gun with a wing position marked by Alpha, while Bailan and Yihan Yu began to notify the entire ship that everyone was preparing to enter the escape state, and with this at the same time. Li Jinggang sent messages and instructions to Xia Bai, the entire fighter group outside, and various weapons were slowly adjusting their directions. Everyone in the bridge was surprisingly calm. Xia Bai also sat down again. He glanced at the scene in front of him, was silent for a moment, and said, the main torpedo launcher is ready. Prepare to launch T1 directional strong electromagnetic pulse torpedo. Proton. The collider cannon is ready to fire. All units are ready to accept the impact, and all the shield energy is invested in the location expected to be hit. All units, prepare for impact. In the sky, the battleship was slowly turning. This was a huge flaw. The Glacier battleship started to prepare its main gun again almost instantly, preparing to destroy Xia Bai's battleship with one blow. Point. At the same moment, Li Guangji, who was in the underground command center of Yaodong building, looked at this scene and suddenly changed his color. Xia Bai, is he crazy? Remind him to evade. Remind him to evade. But it was too late. Point. At this moment, in the sky and on the ground, in the eyes of countless people, the main gun of the dark and cold Glacier warship was lighting up inch by inch. After a short period of energy storage, the dazzling light struck in an instant. It traveled through the entire world and hit Xia Bai's battleship, which was very close to it. Point. The whole world was illuminated by light. At that moment, people in every corner of the entire battlefield instinctively looked in this direction. Point. This scene is imprinted in everyone's eyes. The air seemed to freeze at this moment. Point. On May 11th, 2022, at dusk, the main gun of the Glacier battleship fired for the 5th time. The dazzling flash lit up the sky across Shanghai, and the blazing beam of energy penetrated the main body of Xia Bai's battleship. Point. Please subscribe to the official version. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 345, Request for Fire. Chapter 349, Request to Open Fire. Warning. Our warship is suffering a devastating blow. Warning. The energy shield has been destroyed. Warning. Main engine structure damaged. Warn. Xia Bai's battleship was shaking violently, and alarms came like raindrops from a distance. The light looked like a spear of light flying out from the Glacier battleship. It penetrated directly and sharply from the end of Xia Bai's battleship, and then cut vertically like a scalpel, tearing apart the main structure and armor of the entire battleship inch by inch. The entire battleship was trembling and letting out an overwhelmed whine. Point. Xia Bai raised his head in the faint light. The battleship was moving slowly. At the location where it was hit, the battleship was completely penetrated. Point. Chen-Chi and Sheng's forehead had blue veins popping out. He was trying hard to maintain the balance of the entire battleship, doing his best to make the battleship move in the same direction as the main gun bombardment, while ensuring that the battleship did not disintegrate. He tried his best to keep this behemoth going for a longer period of time. Point. This scene shocked the entire audience, and the dense cluster of fighter jets in the sky froze for almost a second. Point. At this moment, Xian Zhen heard someone in his formation whisper, "Captain, let's run." The voice trembled slightly, full of fear when Xia Bai's battleship was across the sky. Even though it seemed that Xia Bai's battleship did not have much advantage, people still had confidence. However, at this moment, when Xia Bai's battleship was penetrated by beam energy weapons, it was about to being destroyed in midair. Fear will naturally grow crazily like weeds and devour everyone's heart. There was silence in Zundeo, and Shenzhen also fell into silence. They were different from others. They had fighter planes in their hands. Even if Xia Bai's battleship was destroyed, they could still run away and escape from the battlefield. So, is it necessary for him to stay here and wait for death at this moment? How could the alien spacecraft that even Xia Bai's battleships couldn't defeat be defeated by their mere fighter planes? Shenzhen fell into silence as he watched the last message from the battleship on the screen in front of him, cooperating with the battleships. Actions at this moment. The battleship's main torpedo launching system fired. The T1 directional strong electromagnetic pulse torpedo with 500,000 energy points was thrown out by the battleship in an instant and flew straight towards the dark glacier battleship over there with the dazzling flash of the main gun point at the same moment. The electromagnetic pulse torpedo was discovered by the glacier battleship almost instantly. On both sides of the battleship, two rectangular directed energy turrets were turning heavily and opened fire instantly. And at this moment, as the two electromagnetic field interference missiles launched by the T1 directional strong electromagnetic pulse torpedo exploded in space in an instant, the particle beam strikes launched by the two beam energy turrets were deflected instantly, and the angle of deflection was not the same. It's big, but it's enough to get them out of the trajectory of the T1 directional strong electromagnetic pulse torpedo. And Xia Bai's entire battleship's body was wailing. Warning. The battleship's main engine is offline. Warning. The battleship's power system is severely damaged, and the shield module has been damaged to 97%. The entire battleship was being cut open inch by inch. At the moment when the main torpedo launcher fired, the battleship had almost been cut in half lengthwise. A large number of escape cabins were ejected from the main structure of the battleship, and the engine parts were making a loud noise. It exploded with a bang, and the straight and sharp directed energy strike beam still tore the warship apart unstoppably. It moved forward inch by inch in the detonating flames, and the steel ship and heavy armor were like paper in front of it. Like a paste point in 2 seconds, 1/3 of the battleship's structure had collapsed. The main structure of the battleship was trembling. The bridge was flooded by the light of the scalded warning light. The tremors spread from the rear end of the battleship all the way to the ship bridge. The proton collider is ready. The proton collider is ready. Request to fire. Request to fire. A team of specialists directly entered the weapon module of the proton cannon. They will use the backup energy to manually deliver the final blow when the battleship is severely damaged. But now is not the time. The battleship has not yet opened fire. Xia Bai stared at the battlefield and the screen. The T1 directional strong electromagnetic pulse torpedo is still flying in space. Theoretically, at such a close distance, it only takes up to 5 seconds for the torpedo launched by the warship to fly to the designated strike position. However, at this moment, time is so slow, and the torpedo seems to be dragged into bullet time, crawling at a slow snail's pace. This torpedo is all hope. If it can hit and destroy the shield system of the entire glacier battleship, the proton collision cannon can destroy the opponent's entire battleship in a blink of an eye. This way, you can win. On the other hand, if this torpedo is intercepted, Xia Bai's battleship will be dismembered by the opponent's main gun in the air, and this war will undoubtedly fail. But at this moment, the particle beam emitted by the beam energy weapon turret of the glacier battleship has been deflected by the distorted magnetic field created by Xia Bai's battleship. In 5 seconds, what other means can the other side use to stop Xia Bai's cannon? Is there any other way for the opponent to stop this fatal blow? Warning. At 3 o'clock, the manta ray aircraft is approaching rapidly. In the scene of the main battlefield, there is a dark black shadow rushing from the other end of the airspace at high speed like lightning, like a ray of light, rushing straight in front of the T1 directional strong electromagnetic pulse torpedo. At this moment, Xia Bai's expression changed. At the same moment, Shenzhen also saw the manta ray aircraft. At that time, he had just looked away from the last message sent by the battleship when He saw the manta ray aircraft rushing towards the direction of his own battleship at a terrifying high speed point. To be honest, the scene was so chaotic that Shinzen didn't even notice the fish moving over there against the light of the Glacier battleship's main gun. But he noticed the speed of the manta ray aircraft point. He had been fighting with this thing for a long time before, but he had never seen it fly so fast. Its entire fuselage burned, and the edges of the aircraft became red and even began to dismember under the overload speed point. It was like a shooting star or a moth flying into the flame, rushing towards his battleship at all costs, emitting an astonishing scream in midair that seemed to tear the entire space apart. If at this moment, Shinzen, if you weren't sitting in an aircraft, you would probably have your eardrums shattered by the loud noise. So, what is it doing? Why is it so panicked and anxious? Chapter 346 The Final Blow. Chapter 350 The Final Blow. Our ship will launch the final attack, and all units are requested to assist in the battle point. Shinzen didn't know why the manta ray aircraft was so anxious and panicked, but he remembered these words. He remembered what Xia Bai had said to them before Interclimacon point. That was obviously just over 2 months ago, but now that I think about it, it seems like a century has passed. Point at this moment, in their fast lane, there were members of his formation saying sadly, "Captain, let's run," leaving the Green Hills without worrying about having no firewood. Shinzen knew that they were too scared. They were not real soldiers, just ordinary people. Point. But he can't run. Point. He is the captain of this battleship and fighter formation. Point. He promised Xia Bai to join the war. He received the last message from the battleship. Point. And now, his battleship is being destroyed. Point. He must not run. Point. He is not a soldier, but he still has courage. Point. At this moment, he tightly squeezed the joystick in his hand. Point. Then, pull up. Point. At this moment, his fighter plane rose from a low altitude like a dragon leaping out of the sea, and jumped out of his own formation. Point. The speed of his fighter plane was not as fast as that of the manta ray aircraft, but his position was excellent. He was right between the battleship and the manta ray aircraft. Point. The moment he rose from the bottom up, he happened to hit the manta ray aircraft from the bottom up. Point. There was a loud noise, and firelight lit up in the sky. Point. The white pigeon fighter plane produced by the battleship exploded in midair in an instant, and the manta ray aircraft traveling at high speed was suddenly hit and stopped in midair. The entire structure collapsed, and the billowing dense smoke. The smoke scattered a large number of debris fragments, which fell from the midair. The pilots of the Xia Bai battleship who were originally following Shinzen looked at this scene, and were all stunned. Point. But at this moment, only a few people noticed the scene in this corner, because there was an earth-shaking loud noise in the sky. Point. At the last second when the T1 directional strong electromagnetic pulse torpedo hit, the proton impactor of the Xia Bai battleship opened fire. Point. With a buzz sound, a star-like dazzling flash of light lit up in the space. Point. But the first thing that came into play was the T1 directional strong electromagnetic pulse torpedo. Xia Bai didn't see whether it hit the target or exploded in the light of the approaching main gun, but the weapon with 500,000 energy points was not a fake. In an instant, the shockwave swept across, and the entire shield system that was in a semi-invisible state outside the Glacier battleship appeared at that moment, and then disappeared instantly in a bright and flickering light. Point. Not only that, the rectangular directed energy turret cluster of the Glacier battleship also misfired instantly. At the same moment, Xia Bai's battleship also sounded a series of alarms, and the entire electronic system and power system were completely paralyzed. Point. The entire city of Shinsao seemed to have turned into a huge electronic tomb in an instant. Almost all electronic equipment entered a paralyzed state. Those that were close to each other were burned and exploded almost instantly. Point. The bridge of the Xia Bai battleship dimmed in an instant. Point. Or, at that moment, his entire battleship dimmed, leaving no light except for the fearful scorch marks on the battleship and the still burning flames. And at this moment, countless people in the city turned to look at the silent sky. Point. The world dimmed briefly for a moment, and then brightened again. Point. That was the proton impactor hitting the main body of the Glacier battleship. Point. If we could stretch this second infinitely, we could clearly see that the proton collision cannon's bombardment landed on the side of the deck of the Glacier battleship, penetrating its outer armor like a hot needle. It twisted and deformed tragically, and then triggered some unimaginable chain reaction. At the same moment, in no particular order, the entire glacier battleship seemed to be covered with a brilliant light, and then began obliterated. Then an even brighter light appeared. It was as if a star had fallen on this land, and an extremely dazzling flash of light lit up in the space. At this moment, countless people were forced to look away due to this flash of light. In the sky, the arrogant glacier battleship was swallowed up by light and destruction. Xia Bai stood up from the captain's seat on the bridge and looked at the sky through the battleship. But he saw the light directly at the edge of the explosion. Because the battleship is falling. There was darkness inside the battleship, and huge cracks even spread to the bridge of the battleship. Alpha has long been silent, and there is no sound in the tunnel. Only the prompts from the system penetrated into Xia Bai's ears over and over again. The proton collider is offline. 1. The battleship was damaged to 87%. The main system is damaged. 1. Alpha is offline. 1. The battleship was damaged to 89%. The main structure is disintegrating. 1. Xia Bai lowered his gaze and took one last look at the corner of the airspace, which was the last position where Shenzhen's White Dove fighter plane and the Manta Ray aircraft collided. It was the White Pigeon fighter jet that gave Xia Bai the last chance, allowing the T1 directional strong electromagnetic pulse torpedo to reach the designated location accurately and play its role. But now, it's all over in the sky. The battleship was falling. In the underground command center of Yaodong building, Li Guangji looked at the dark scene in front of him and finally couldn't hold on any longer. His body collapsed to one side. Behind him, the command center screamed in surprise. Farther away, Xiang Hangsheng stood on the tank and gave military salute in this direction from a distance. In front of him and behind him, countless soldiers in the position made the same movements almost at the same time. At this moment, the entire Shenzhen fell into a deathly silence. And at this moment, in the corner of the city, in the ruined street, the beautiful woman holding the little girl also stopped and raised her head. She saw a huge warship, billowing with thick smoke and scattering debris, passing violently over her head, collapsing countless crumbling buildings along the way, and crashing down on the bank of the Pujiang River in the distance. There was a huge earthquake, and the whole world trembled. The woman lost her balance and fell to the ground. Then she looked back. The billowing smoke and dust came from afar, swallowing up the street and everything, swallowing her in the blink of an eye. As Xia Bai's battleship landed, half of the city was engulfed in billowing smoke. At 4:53 on May 11th, 2022, in the eyes of countless people, the giant ship fell from the sky. Chapter 347 Shanghai Night. Chapter 351 Night in Shanghai, May 11, 2022, Shanghai, May. I have your name. My name is Shen Jiaming. What? About her? She is my daughter. Her name is Shen Yuiu. Yeah, well, after registering, go over there to get protective equipment and food, and then follow the people over there. Do you understand? Okay, well, I want to ask, are the people in that ship, that battleship okay? You are the 321st person to ask me about this today, but I'm just a registered person, so I don't know. The woman named Chen Jiaming nodded slightly when she heard the words. Her face was grey. She hesitated for a moment, as if she wanted to say something, but in the end she didn't say anything. She just turned around silently and hugged her. He walked to the other side with his child. The location she was in was a small temporary shed built against a piece of ruins. Inside the shed were military registration officers, while outside the shed was lined up with survivors who looked very embarrassed. These people are all remaining survivors from the areas affected by the previous war. Many people survived because of the appearance of Xia Bai's battleship. Otherwise, they would have been the first group of people to die at that time. But now, they are all survivors after the war, and because of this, they were also the closest people when the battleship fell from the sky. They almost watched the battleship fall from the sky with their own eyes. So at this moment, almost everyone wanted to ask how the battleship and the people in the battleship were doing. But the answer everyone got was the same as the answer Shen Jiaming got. The rescuers had already passed by, but it was already midnight, and no news had come back. At this time, Fine raindrops began to fall from the sky. Shen Jiaming held her child in her arms and walked silently on the streets littered with debris. She came to the place where she received food, took 2 pieces of bread as big as her palm, and handed them to her child. At this time, she heard her child ask somewhat confusedly, "Where is Uncle Ding Yuan King?" Shen Jiaming was stunned for a moment. For a moment, she wanted to cry, but in the end she just smiled and said, "He went to help others. You see, there are so many people here who need help now, right?" Shen Yui was stunned for a moment and said, "Then will he come back?" Shen Jiaming thought for a moment and said, "Maybe not, because we don't need help anymore, right? He wants to help more people in need, right?" Shen Yui took a bite of the slightly cold bread, tilted her head and thought for a while, before letting out a sigh. Shen Jiaming smiled slightly. She put the girl down, held her hand, and walked forward step by step under the light of the searchlight and the rain. Her back was a little long and seemed a little fragile. At this moment, the slightly crowded crowd in front was suddenly separated, and Shen Jiaming saw a row of military vehicles roaring in from a distance and then roaring away again. There seemed to be some important people sitting in the car. As their car drove over, the surrounding military people involuntarily stopped what they were doing and glanced this way. The person sitting in the car is Xiang Hongsheng. His troops were relatively close to here, so they immediately took on the task of search, rescue, and coordination. Xiang Hongsheng sat in the car and frowned. The arrogant looking glacier battleship was destroyed, but the situation didn't get better. It was just that the desperate crisis was gone. Xia Bai's battleship fell. It is said that with the disappearance of the strong electromagnetic pulse interference, a certain security system inside Xia Bai's battleship came back online. As for the security system of the battleship, the search and rescue personnel sent by the military, actually they are all unauthorized intruders. Therefore, the search and rescue operation encountered huge troubles from the beginning. Moreover, Li Guangji also collapsed. His physical condition had long since failed, and the appointment letter from the head of Shangfeng No. 1 had not yet been issued. His collapse would mean that the entire Shenzhen was dead. What does it mean to be headless in this time of year, when the glacier battleships stretched across the sky? Everyone could work together, but now, the reason why Xiang Hongsheng rushed over so anxiously was because he had just heard the news that someone wanted to directly take control of the battleship, and even got into trouble with the security system inside the battleship. What on earth is this doing? Xiang Hongsheng really doesn't understand. Sometimes the storm was coming, and I didn't know how many people were staring at Xia Bai's battleship. And now the entire electronic system in Shenzhen is almost completely paralyzed. Xiang Hongsheng doesn't know what the last thing launched by Xia Bai's warship is. Half of the city's electronic facilities have been burned on the spot, and most of the entire city's all electronic equipment went into a crashed state. Their equipment was not as capable as Xia Bai's battleship and the glacier battleship. They could be preserved and even repaired under this level of electromagnetic pulse. In fact, according to Xiang Hongsheng's understanding, if Xia Bai's battleship was not seriously torn apart by the main gun, it would not take long for them to be able to recover from the electromagnetic pulse just now. This was even more true for the glacier battleship. If Xia Bai had not launched the proton impactor as soon as possible and completely destroyed the ship the moment the opponent's shield disappeared, the ship would probably still be in the sky now. The giant ships flying in the sky are like monsters that are not afraid of electromagnetic weapons, but there are not so many ice in the world. The alien glacier battleship was destroyed in the air, and Xia Bai's battleship was also seriously damaged. Without any mitigation, it collapsed like a jade pillar pushing down a mountain of gold. What's worse is that, now that Xia Bai's life and death are not confirmed, some people are starting to want to carve up Xia Bai's battleship. The most ridiculous statement Xiang Hongsheng heard was not this, but Xia Bai's battleship destroyed the alien spacecraft, depriving mankind of a way to study other people's technology. This was Xia Bai's attempt to monopolize high-end technology. Xia Bai is a human war criminal. Xiang Hongsheng thought, if Xia Bai hadn't brought down the ship, it's probably unknown whether the person who said these words would still be alive to speak out, right? But now is not the time to argue about these things. It is already 1 o'clock in the morning on May 12th. 8 hours after Xia Bai's battleship crashed, Xia Bai has not appeared yet, which means that he is likely to fall into a coma, or in a worse situation. They must launch a rescue as soon as possible to ensure the safety of the people who saved Shenzhen. Chapter 348 The Wrecked Ship. Chapter 352 The Wrecked Ship. The night in Shanghai is particularly dark point today. A big battle cleared up half of the dense clouds in the sky, but within just a few hours, the city was once again shrouded in rain clouds, with heavy drizzle falling in the early morning hours at 2 o'clock in the morning on May 12th. Xiang Hangsheng arrived at the battleship's crash zone. His feet touched the slightly muddy ground and he took a slight breath. Proton impact cannons are also within the scope of nuclear weapons, and the radiation is not that strong. However, after the outcome of the war, the evacuation and evacuation of the entire city began. People who are still in the city must wear relevant protection as much as possible. Equipment. Xiang Hangsheng also put on a radiation-proof mask, but did not wear any biochemical suit as required. He had read the report himself and found that the radiation was not that serious, and it was only a little bit irritating. Xia Bai's warship landed on the coast of Pujiang River. The battleship that fell from the sky was like a huge meteorite, smashing down all the facilities along the Pujiang River. The river water poured in, and the battleship was half sunk in the river and half stranded on the ground. A large amount of lighting equipment had been installed here early. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, but it was bright here. Various staff were walking back and forth, and various related equipment had been dropped off immediately. Coming here, it can be seen that the military and people at all levels attach great importance to this place. Although communications in the city are now severely affected, when someone of Xiang Hangsheng's level comes, he will always find a way to know in advance. Therefore, Xiang Hangsheng got out of the car at this moment, and a group of people came up to meet him. They were all military soldiers with live ammunition. They also wore radiation protection equipment. In the bright lights and overlapping night, they looked like it's a group of moving ghosts. A bit scary. Xiang Hangsheng pursed his lips and walked forward. But as soon as he took a step, his correspondent in the car behind him ran over and said, "Sir, the latest situation." Xiang Hangsheng glanced at the ghost coming over, pursed his lips, looked at the correspondent beside him, and said, "What's going on?" A large number of type 3 virus infections have emerged in the coastline area. The number is alarming, and they are impacting the coastal defense line. Xiang Hangsheng took a breath and said, "Is the news accurate?" The correspondent nodded slightly and said, "That's correct." Now, their information network in Shanghai has been paralyzed to the level of the anti-Japanese war era, but this kind of information cannot be wrong. Xiang Hangsheng just asked one more question and said nothing more. He only murmured in a low voice, "That thing was destroyed, and Shenzhen's shield was gone." At this time, the ghost warrior over there had already arrived in front of Xiang Hangsheng. The leader of the team in front said, "Please follow us." Xiang Hangsheng took a look and walked forward. Others are responsible for the coastline. Xiang Hangsheng and his troops are responsible for the evacuation of survivors in the urban area and the protection of the interior. The type 3 virus infection that landed from the coastline is not his responsibility. But Xiang Hangsheng couldn't stay here for too long, because it was said that outside Shenzhen, zombies who had been silent for a long time suddenly surged. The great changes in Shanghai this time undoubtedly gave the intelligent zombies an opportunity. Xiang Hangsheng led his guards and followed the group of people inside. The battleship that crashed here is like a beached whale. Even though it is scarred, it still makes everyone who sees it feel frightened and awestruck. Under the illumination of the large searchlights in the field, the cold and dark shell of the battleship shone with an icy cold light. In fact, at this moment, on this battleship, traces of scorch and cracks all over it can be seen everywhere. Xiang Hangsheng couldn't help but take a breath and walked forward under the guidance of the people in front. According to the original plan and itinerary, Xiang Hangsheng should first go to meet the person in charge here or something like that, but Xiang Hangsheng directly omitted this step. From his current position, no one dares to say anything wrong. Therefore, Xiang Hangsheng took his 2 guards and directly entered the interior of the battleship. The interior of the battleship was indeed seriously damaged. When it was in the sky, the entire behemoth was shining brightly. But at this moment, its interior was dark, and because of the severe damage and the existence of safety measures, here it is also difficult to expand and explore. The military came here and set up equipment for several hours, but only opened a path leading to the core command bridge point. Most of the people here were military security personnel, as well as various scientific researchers. No one could stop Xiang Hongsheng. In this way, Xiang Hongsheng went directly to the core area of the entire battleship point, that is the determined location of the bridge. The entire battleship was severely damaged, but it is actually quite complete. The main structure is not too damaged, but according to the experts here, it seems to have entered some kind of safe mode point. The expert also knew Xiang Hongsheng and said, as you can see the current situation, some kind of safety mode seems to be activated here. This is the bridge of the entire battleship, the central core position protected by the layers of decks. This alone, there is an independent simple shield at the door of the bridge on the first floor, and there are other weapon systems on both sides. Xiang Hongsheng frowned when he heard this and said, can't we force a breakthrough? He couldn't help but glance at the door in front of him. The space was cold and slightly dark, like the scene in an alien spaceship in a horror movie. The expert said, you can break through by force, but the location here is very special. It is the bridge position. Breaking through by force may not only destroy the internal structure, but may even cause the rebound of more weapon systems. Xiang Hongsheng frowned when he heard this and said, what's going on with his grandma? We can't even touch this battleship after it's like this. He frowned and looked at the door in front of him, thinking, does this mean he looks down on their technology? Xiang Hongsheng was depressed for a moment and then said, then what should we do? It's been a few hours since you came in. Is there nothing we can do? The expert's level was far below Xiang Hongsheng's, and he was less courageous. He said, at this moment, we have actually just arrived at this position not long ago, and we have just started research. As for the method, it is not that there is no method. As long as you find someone with authority, you can open the hatch of the bridge here. Xiang Hongsheng frowned and said, why don't you hurry up and find them? Are they the members of Xia Bai's battleship? Chapter 349 Rainy Night. Chapter 353 Rainy Night. People, we have already gone to find them. Please don't worry, Commander Xiang. At this moment, another voice sounded in the field point. It was a slightly cold female voice. Xiang Hongsheng turned his head, squinted his eyes, and looked in that direction, and said, Secretary Wu, I heard that the guy Liao Kiwei is not in charge here. You almost had sex with Xia. The relationship with your husband has collapsed, but he still dares to use you. Coming from the corridor was none other than Xia Bai's old acquaintance, the former Secretary Wu. She was leading two people from the main passage outside the battleship's bridge step by step. When he arrived in front of Xiang Hongsheng, he first glanced at the hatch of the bridge of the gold coin battleship, smiled slightly, and said, did I break up the deal? Haha, then why is it Mr. Xia who needs rescue now and not us? As for how to open this place, please rest assured that Mr. Liao has personally gone to find the members of the fleet, and by 5 o'clock at the latest, he will definitely be able to bring back someone with sufficient authority to take over the bridge in this battleship. Xiang Hongsheng glanced at her, narrowed his eyes slightly, and said, as expected of the famous person next to Liao Kiwei, he dares to talk to me in any way. Secretary Wu has a completely commercial smile on her face, but she is very sweet by nature. Even if there is no smile in her smile, she still gives people a cheerful feeling. Sir Xiang misunderstood. I will never respect your wishes, but since we are in charge here, please rest assured that nothing will go wrong. Xiang Hongsheng said, do you mean to let me go back home? I didn't mean that. Secretary Wu smiled, but I heard that a large number of zombies have emerged in the hatching area. Intelligent zombies are surging, and the evacuation of Shenzhen has not ended. There are still a large number of zombies. The survivors are trapped in the city, so, Xiang Hongsheng asked, what are you going to do? Secretary Wu was stunned for a moment when she heard this. She didn't expect that Xiang Hongsheng would change the topic so quickly. She thought about it and said, of course we should open the bridge door, rescue Mr. Xia and the others, and then restore the situation as much as possible. A battleship, when she said this, she paused and said, we all hope that this battleship can fly as soon as possible, don't we? I've heard about that too. When Xiang Hongsheng heard this, he looked slightly surprised and said, do you also know about the manta ray aircraft, Secretary? Wu smiled, moved slightly closer to Xiang Hongsheng, and said, so Commander Xiang, please believe that we will do the right thing. Xiang Hongsheng said, Liao Qiwei really dares to say anything. Before the previous battle in Shenzhen was completely over, the first two manta ray aircraft to be shot down were the two glacier battleships. The first one to be destroyed exploded in the air, while the remaining second manta ray aircraft was shot down later. It was knocked out of mid-air by Shenzhen, the commander of the White Pigeon fighter formation of Xia Bai's battleship. It was seriously damaged, but it did not directly explode to pieces like the previous manta ray aircraft. The fuselage was still intact. After falling, it was destroyed. The military blocked and surrounded it, but the situation there was different from here. People were wary of Xia Bai's battleship, but they couldn't break through to the position of the manta ray aircraft for the time being. Although the aircraft no longer has the ability to take off, part of the weapon system can still function. Although it fell from the sky, it was like a hedgehog, making it difficult for the military to completely capture it. The glacier battleship was hit by a proton. The bombardment was shattered into pieces. Now, only the manta ray aircraft is still intact. If the military wants to learn about alien creatures and alien civilizations through this, it cannot take to extreme measures. There has been a stalemate over there, which is also a big trouble point. And when the glacier battleship was destroyed, the manta ray aircraft sent a signal into space, which was most likely a request for help. Although news came from the US military as soon as possible, and they conducted a preliminary interception. Part of the signal was still thrown into the depths of space. This matter was sealed as a secret, and strict confidentiality hung over everyone who knew it like a thick cloud. But now, the confidentiality measures on this matter are obviously not as good as it seems. Secretary Wu smiled slightly and said, Commander Xiang, if you still have something to do, you might as well get busy. Xiang Hongsheng glanced at her and said, I do want to leave, but things here are equally important. We all urgently need to talk to Xia Bai, and we must find a way to get this battleship up again as soon as possible. Changbei Mountain Survivor Base. They also greeted us over there, and no one can afford the slightest mistake in this matter. At this point, Xiang Hongsheng changed the topic slightly and said, my guard squad leader, one of the two guards behind him, stood up and responded loudly. Xiang Hongsheng said, I'll leave this place to you. You and your people will take care of this place for me. Apart from anything else, if one of the people in this bridge has a problem, I will be the only one who will do it. You asked. The squad leader of the security squad was slightly stunned when he heard this and said, Commander, let's look here. Who will protect you? Don't I have legs myself? Xiang Hongsheng asked. In this city of Shen, the aliens have been defeated. I really don't believe that I can make any mistakes. Now your mission has changed. It is no longer you're protecting me. The people on the bridge of this battleship are your commanders. Do you understand? The squad leader of the guard class was stunned for a while before he finally came to his senses and responded loudly. His voice was so loud that Secretary Wu next to him was slightly startled and took half a step back. Seeing this, Xiang Hongsheng took a breath, turned around and walked out. As Secretary Wu said, although it was late at night, Commander Xiang was needed everywhere in Shenzhen. He could never wait here. He could only take a look at the situation before leaving. Therefore, this time when he came here, he brought a convoy and brought his entire security squad with him, just to keep the security squad behind. Xiang Hongsheng got into the car again, turned around and drove out of the area. On the way, they met another huge convoy head on. It should be Liao Qiwei bringing people from Xia Bai's battleship. Xiang Hongsheng hesitated for a moment, didn't get out of the car, didn't do anything. He just passed by the other team's team. The rain in Shanghai gradually became heavier, but the falling raindrops were still thin and messy, just like the current situation in Shanghai. Chapter 350 Awakening. Chapter 354 Awakening. Xia Bai had a dream. It was an endless nightmare. He was walking on the streets of Bingcheng campus. As he walked, the companion who was talking and laughing with him suddenly turned his head and rushed towards him with his eyes open and his mouth wide open. Xia Bai started running in panic. As he ran, a gap suddenly opened in the ground. The gap seemed to come from the sky, spreading from the end of the horizon to Xia Bai's feet. No matter how he tried to avoid it, he could only watch himself fall from here. Then came the boundless fall. Xia Bai has been falling like this for a seemingly infinite time in the future. I don't know how long it took, and I don't know how far I fell. Just a sense of falling and boundless darkness. Xia Bai didn't have much fear, only confusion. He didn't know what he should do. He was like a person who woke up after a hangover. The world in front of him was still the world in front of him, but his thinking was unable to make any effective decision, meaningful judgments. Then Xia Bai woke up. When he opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was the sunlight pouring in from outside the window. It was a bright, warm sunbeam. Seeing this light after falling into the long dark world made Xia Bai feel slightly dazzled. The light seemed to be the flash of the main gun in Xia Bai's memory. Xia Bai's last memory before the dream was the bright flash of the main gun that penetrated the battleship. It is so dazzling, like a star throwing attacks towards the ground, gorgeous and terrifying. But this is not a battlefield. Xia Bai was not sitting on the captain's seat on the bridge, but was lying on a single bed. The air was full of the smell of disinfectant. He even had a bottle hanging on it, and there were all kinds of things on both sides. A medical device that Xia Bai couldn't name. This is obviously a hospital room. And just in the corner of Xia Bai's bed, there was a girl sitting. The girl was wearing a white dress, and her whole body was bathed in the sun. The warm and golden light reflected on her body seemed to be dazzling, and her fair skin revealed a golden luster, like a person walking out of a painting. She was lowering her head to peel an apple. So when Xia Bai opened her eyes, she didn't notice anything. Xia Bai was in a trance and did not recognize who this person was at the first time. He only squinted his eyes and looked at the pleasant scenery. Finally, his eyes fell on the apple in the other person's hand. The woman peeled the apple very carefully, sticking to the skin with every cut, as if she was afraid of wasting a tiny bit. Because this is the end of the world. Even though it is already the 5th year of the apocalypse, apples, a fruit that used to be everywhere in the streets, no matter what season, are still rare. Even any young mountain only successfully cultivated a batch of fruits that can survive in the new apocalypse last year. It's just an apple tree in the environment. In the apocalyptic environment, the Earth's environment is changing rapidly, and things that were once easily grown are now difficult to grow. Now that I think about it, the atmospheric transformation has actually already begun. This apple was like a key or a valve to Xia Bai, directly turning on the switch of Xia Bai's groggy brain, making him gradually wake up. My mind, which had been falling in the dreamland for a long time, also became clear and stable at this moment. In an instant, countless thoughts came to Xia Bai's head. Why am I here? How is the battleship? Was that glacier battleship really destroyed? These thoughts sprung up in Xia Bai's mind like mushrooms after rain, but his eyes finally fell on the girl sitting on the edge of his bed. His mood gradually calmed down, and those problems faded away in an instant. Those things seemed to become unimportant at this moment. There is only this scene in front of me. The girl sitting in the sunshine is more fascinating, isn't it? That's Balan. Xia Bai stared at her silently for a while, and then said, look at you peeling carefully. You are the elder of any young mountain, my people. If you want to eat apples, just tell me how much you want. Xia Bai's sudden voice startled Balan. The girl's hand holding the knife made a slight mistake and cut off a large piece of the apple. However, she did not look at the apple in her hand. Instead, she raised her head like lightning and looked at Xia Bai beside her. At this moment, Xia Bai was staring closely at the apples in the girl's hand, chattering non-stop. Just wait, I will ask Hao Zhuang to move a box of apples to your room tomorrow. Bai Lan glanced at Xia Bai and couldn't help but burst into laughter after hearing these words. Then she lowered her head and continued to peel the apple in her hand. When Balan smiled, Xia Bai couldn't stop her mouth. Why are you still smiling like that? Am I wrong? Hey, you still don't want an apple? When I was chatting with Leo Shine from our beige formation 2 days ago. Speaking of which, now that battleships have everything, be more heroic and don't search like you did in the apocalypse. Look at how you took the lead on your own. Bai Lang glanced at him and said, why am I so petty when I peel them? As far as I know, when the first batch of apples in any Yang mountain were produced and distributed, not many people peeled them. I don't think so. Eating skin is already very popular. Okay. Xia Bai was slightly stunned when he heard this, because what Bailan said was true. Peeling and eating an apple already made him more arrogant than others. Xia Bai smacked his lips and said, Bai. Lang peeled off a small piece of apple, stuffed it into Xia Bai's mouth, and smiled. I don't know what to say, right? She glanced at Xia Bai, smiled, and said, I know what you mean. You want to give me, we are different, right, Bai? Lan's voice was very soft and his eyes were soft, like the moist spring breeze blowing from the lake, making people relax just listening to the voice. Xia Bai ate the apple in his mouth, and didn't know what to say. He just said, this is from Shenzhen, right? It's not as sweet as our Yang mountain, Bai. Lan smiled and said quietly, you guys are still exactly the same as before. You come and go like the wind on weekdays, but you just don't know how to talk to women. Xia Bai. He opened his mouth, and for a while he didn't know what kind of response he should make to this comment. In the end, he could only exhale and silently swallowed all the apples in his mouth. Bailan started laughing again. She pursed her lips and squinted her eyes as she smiled, sitting in the sunshine. She was so beautiful. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.